UFOs Part 9, Revelations, with Marty Garza. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau, and we are joined once again in studio by the one and only Marty Garza, here to do another UFO episode. Welcome, buddy. Thanks for coming
glad
back.
to have you back,
Thanks
buddy.
for having me back. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And Marty brought us some beers.
We're gonna crack some beers.
Crack open these
For
beers.
this UFO episode here. All right.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers. Are there any actual UFOs in this episode?
I think there's at least 2 references.
Yeah.
So what? We're going down the which rabbit hole are we in?
The 4th one to the left.
Is this still like the spiritual sort of aspect?
No, in this, we've discussed this in the past. How there's layers to all this, right? This is like 3-dimensional chess, right? So we're now kind of going up to a different layer, but these layers have a tendency to bleed through the layers above and below them. So there'll be some patterns. There's a couple of different patterns in this.
Intermediateness.
Yeah. Yes.
This
exactly.
is 4th dimensional super checkers.
But we're shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this time we're changing it up again. Like we're still learning how to do these presentations. They're always really good, but we're trying to streamline the process. This time I've had a chance to read in advance the material that Marty's going to present, so I do kind of know what's going to happen, which helps. Like the only things that I've ever read completely cold, without any idea what's going to be in it on the show, are Marty's presentations.
And a few news stories. Yeah.
Well, I usually know basically what those are going to be about. Like with Marty's
They
stuff.
even have headlines.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like hitting a piñata.
That's right. I'm like, where are the UFOs, Marty?
So is this a spiritual side of the UFO thing still, or is there some nuts and bolts
like.
craft stuff?
Can I say what okay?
Yeah.
I would say, as I read through it, that what it looks like is Marty is going more along the lines of look at what they are telling people, and then the actions that causes these people to take.
Oh, okay.
It's cool. It's gonna be really interesting. Did you
But
say that's
again,
a
there's
fair-
bleed through. There's bleed.
Oh, yeah.
There's bleed through. There's bleed through to low layers below and layers above, and the layers above will be things we'll get to in the next episode.
So wait,
there it is
wait a
already.
minute. Wait. We're digging our way out, or are we digging our way in? Like, why are the layers above?
Because I guess they could be. It's harder to describe the layers that are further to the inside or outside if we're talking about 3-dimensional.
Yeah, I think. Well, I was reminded of Valet and Bramley when I was reading through this. Not that you're copying anything that they've done, but it's just like I recognize these themes, and you're merging them in a really interesting way.
Right. I think I wrote this a little bit different because I wanted. I enjoy the back and forth conversation we have.
Yeah.
And I think it allows us to explore different ideas that are kind of buried inside of these things. So this one's a little less obscure. Maybe it's a little more direct to the point. But it lends itself to a lot of discussion because there's, like I said, there are different layers to this, and these may be different interpretations to these scenarios that we're reading.
Yeah. Yep. And it is, I do give you crap, but it is clear throughout this that we're still talking about the same phenomena that we've been talking about. But of course, like you're saying, it merges into so many other things at the edges. Right. So it is intermediatist, as Fort would say. It's fuzzy, right?
Definitely.
Fuzzy UFOs.
Fuzzy UFOs. All right, so did you want to say anything about rock and roll? We got agricultural, possibly. I'm still trimming the peach trees.
Yeah. Rock and roll update is basically we have the mastering done.
Yeah.
It's now we're working on the artwork.
Okay.
And it's looking pretty
Fantastic.
cool already. So Still planning on a solstice release date
All right.
in whatever form it is in when it's released. But I think I know. So we will be setting up Patreon for the band, and obviously like a PayPal and other ways that people can donate. And I'm pretty sure everybody's on board. We're just giving this thing away.
Yeah, it's going to be value for value.
Yeah, value for value.
So released in a high quality digital format.
Yep.
Plus the option to purchase
and
yourself.
We'll submit it. We'll submit it to iTunes and to Google Play and all those places. That's going to take longer.
Yeah.
The day of release is going to be like, boom, it's on the website.
Right. Yeah.
And here, sign up to the Patreon if you want, or give us a one-time donation or whatever. And then we're going to be ordering vinyl.
Yeah.
Which is going to be extremely expensive. So, if people, depending on how the release goes, the digital release, if people are generous, then it will be easier for us to get vinyls quicker.
Right. There you go.
So, and then we can probably do pre-orders for those and stuff like that. But you'll probably be able to get your hands on it, at least the digital release, on the solstice.
Right. Excellent. All right, Space Brother News. You got
sure,
that button
man.
over there somewhere?
I do.
From spacebrother.com. Geomagnetic Storm Watch for a G1 class. A minor geomagnetic storm is possible this week in response to a pair of approaching CMEs. The first CME, launched by an M4 class flare from departing sunspot AR2975, could graze Earth's magnetic field on April 6th. The second CME, flung away from the sun by an exploding filament of magnetism, might deliver a glancing blow on April 7th. Their combined effect could produce G1 class storming. Also, a canyon of fire. Yesterday, on April 3rd, a filament of magnetism whipsawed out of the sun's atmosphere, and on the way out, it carved a gigantic canyon of fire. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded the eruption. The glowing walls of the canyon are at least 20,000 kilometers high and 10 times that long. They trace the channel where the filament was previously suspended by magnetic forces inside the sun's atmosphere. A coronal mass ejection has since emerged from the blast site. The expanding cloud will probably sideswipe Earth's magnetic field on the 7th of April. A canyon of fire, guys.
Man. Don't want to be there.
No. Current conditions, solar wind speed 445.1 kilometers per second. The density is relatively low, 4.0 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number is 129. The neutron count keeps going down, 6.1% above the space age average. And planetary K index right now, KP is 1, quiet, but the 24-hour max was at 4, which is unsettled. So there you go, Space Weather News for the week.
Don't want to kayak that Sun Canyon.
Don't want to kayak that canyon of fire. All right, got a couple of emails to tackle, but let me get the crypto update real quick. Right now, Bitcoin is at $46,669.64. And Ethereum is $3,521.49.
Nice. There you go.
Let's see. Emails. We have 3 to do this episode. Let's do a short one quick. This is from Matt, also known as Sloppy Future in the Discord. Real short. Says, one of the reasons that I love your podcast, you are on part 8 of the Book of the Damned, and you still aren't finished. The in-depth format is wonderful. Especially grateful, from Sloppy Future.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that, buddy.
And
Wow, the Watcher says that canyon is 1.8 Earths deep and 18 Earths long and or wide.
Wow.
What's that in dinosaurs?
That is a big canyon. Yeah, tell us what that is in T-Rexes, Watcher. Okay, we got another email from Greg. I met Greg on the recent Randwolf tour, the Middle Cumberland. So So he says, snakes! I recently went on the Rand Wolf tour and had the pleasure of meeting Russ in person. His Egypt trip presentation was filled with great photos and an elegantly laid out logical argument against the standard model. Sorry you couldn't make the trip, Kyle. But I am slowly working my way through your content. I am now on episode number 134, Earth in Upheaval Part 2. And you two have replaced Dan Carlin as my absolute favorite.
Whoa, dude.
Wow.
That's a compliment.
That is a high compliment. Thank
that.
you. I find the variety of topics and their presentation to be mind-expanding, enlightening, and most important, your observations, arguments against the standard model to be very logical. I find the way your personalities mesh and your relationship with each other to be very heartwarming. That really makes your humor quick-witted and very clever, which is super entertaining. I've heard you mention Meadowbrook Rock Shelter a few times. You know what he's talking about there? Meadowbrook Rock Shelter. I live pretty close to it, and I plan on visiting in a few weeks. I will get some pics and report to you what is up there. Things I would change about the podcast? This space is intentionally left blank because I wouldn't change a thing. I have a gift or two that I would like to ship to you. I need the address, and I couldn't get in the Discord. Take care. Hope all is well. Yeah, Greg, I will send you an email with the address. Appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah, this is the one. I think I did a story on this where they had recently dated some of the stuff. Like, well, they went back through records of, how did it go? It was something where they took data from previous things and they found out that it had been occupied for 23,000 years or something, like some ridiculous amount of time. So it's a pre-Clovis site.
Yeah, push the dates back.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, dude, cool. Check it out. Do some recon. Let us know, oh boy.
Okay, the Watcher says that Sun Canyon was 248,548.48 T-Rexes deep and 2,485,484 T-Rexes long. There we go. That's it. Something like that.
That really helps make it more confusing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Watcher. 250,000 T-Rexes, folks. Okay, this one is from Patty, who I also met on the recent Middle Cumberland tour. And she is also in the Discord as Chap Patty. So this is called Jamie Masson. Hello, brothers. In the 90s, there was this big explosion of UFO sightings in Mexico. And a journalist, Jamie Masson, started gathering a database with hundreds of videos sent to him by people all over Mexico. Long story short, I just ran into this film, Masson's UFO Files from 2021. I highly recommend you watch it. Anywho, one of the cases presented there is about a Mexican Air Force airplane being surrounded by about 11 objects at an altitude of about 12,000 feet in 2004. The interesting thing is that the pilots could not see the objects with their own eyes, but their infrared camera was showing the objects on their monitors. Why? Possibly different dimensions the camera is able to pick up, but not us with our not-so-advanced eyes. Next time you have Marty on, could you ask him? Does Marty know about Jamie Masson, I wonder? He is a very well-known Mexican journalist. Anyway, hope all is good. Until next time, from Patty. Well, we do happen to have Marty here, Patty. So I saved this email until this episode.
Yeah, Jaime Maussan was actually really popular.
Jaime, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Why didn't you tell me?
Well, okay. Jaime Maussan was really popular back in the 90s. He's a little enthusiastic, I guess would be a good way to characterize it. I am familiar with the case. The footage that you're referring to is not an optical camera. It's actually FLIR. So what you're seeing there, and this would explain why the pilots couldn't see it visually, but it could be seen on the FLIR recordings, or that FLIR is looking for heat.
Yeah.
So those heat sources may have been sufficiently far where they're not optically visible at all. And the reason I say that is there was a lot of controversy over that because, again, since a FLIR is usually on a dome, and depending on the type of aircraft, I don't remember what type of aircraft they were in, but the FLIRs are usually on the belly of the aircraft or in the nose, and it's theoretically possible that the FLIR was pointed in a completely different direction than where they were observing. And that footage, there are clouds visible, and that has led some people to believe that what they're actually seeing are like oil rigs out in the ocean, and you're seeing through the clouds out at these distant oil rigs. And, and these oil rigs a lot of times will have a vent where they have like a small flame on the top.
So if they're at 12,000 feet
Right.
and the camera's looking at clouds, it's probably looking down at the clouds. Is that the point?
Yeah. So it's really hard to, and if you're in the Discord, so you know this, and I try to be really cautious about the things I say, and I'm very hesitant to comment very much on lights in the sky or those kind of sightings, because there's really no way to know what they are, and that's why I look for these patterns instead. I think they're a little more in the grand scheme of things more meaningful, because again, even the most definitive footage, I mean, take for example the Tic Tac, this is footage that was, authenticated by the Navy and it was legitimate, right? It's not a hoax. And even then, there's endless debate over it. And it'll never be settled. Like it's, so it's, I try to avoid those type of things. And you just chalk it up to like, okay, it's more data, right? You just throw that in the database. Okay, here is this anomalous event. There were all these objects observed that may or may not have been in the sky. Maybe they were on the ocean ring. So I am familiar with it, but again, I can't really comment about what that footage shows.
Right.
So, FLIR cameras. I'm just looking at this Wikipedia page. They are. It says. Forward-looking infrared cameras, as well as those of other thermal imaging cameras, use detection of infrared radiation, typically emitted from a heat source, to create an image assembled for video output. They can be used to help pilots and drivers steer their vehicles at night in a fog, or to detect warm objects against a cooler background. The wavelength of infrared that thermal imaging cameras detect is 3 to 12 micrometers, and differs significantly from that of night vision, which operates in the visible light and near-infrared ranges. But then they have a picture here of FLIR imagery from a U.S. Navy helicopter, and it's like clear that you can see boats, people standing in the boat, and all that kind of stuff. So this is, I mean, that's a pretty good image.
Yeah, that is a good one.
And then they have long range and medium range. They say that long range can be, like longer distance viewing can be made more difficult because infrared light is absorbed, scattered, and refracted by air and by water vapor. So,
the farther away it is, it's harder to see.
Yeah.
It gets dissipated.
Some long wave cameras require their detector to be cryogenically cooled, typically for several minutes before use, although some moderately sensitive infrared cameras do not require this.
Yep, that's one of the things they're doing with some of the telescopes they're putting up to look at the cosmic microwave background. They have to be cryogenically cooled to see that 2 degrees above absolute zero.
Many camera systems use digital image processing to improve the image quality. Infrared imaging sensor arrays often have wildly inconsistent sensitivities from pixel to pixel due to limitations in the manufacturing process. To remedy this, the response of each pixel is measured at the factory, and a transform, most often linear, maps the measured input signal to an output level.
Yeah, that introduces a whole nother level
then you got
of uncertainty.
artifacts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, because you're right. A processor is processing these pixels and it interprets it in a way that
So if you
it
have,
understands, right?
Yeah.
It's trying to present you something you're familiar with that the programmer actually, put in the code.
It has to recognize
Right,
it.
exactly.
Yeah,
so if
that's
it's something completely anomalous, you may not really be seeing an accurate representation of what was there.
Yep. All right. I think that tackles everything we've got at the beginning here. Should we take a break and start this, or just go ahead and get started? What time we got?
we got like half. We're
Okay.
like halfway through. So let's get started.
All right, well, we'll get started here. So, as usual with Marty's documents, we start with a quote. In every crowd are certain persons who seem just like the rest, yet they bear amazing messages. This was from Antoine-Marie Jean-Baptiste Rogier, I think is how you say that guy's name. Born in 1828 near Springfield, Ohio, John, is that Newbro?
Yes.
Okay, John Newbro was a well-educated physician who, much like Dr. John Dee, possessed an insatiable hunger for esoteric knowledge. In 1857, at the age of 29, Newbro's search led him to begin sitting in on seances, which he executed with more than a little bit of skepticism. However, after witnessing several credible apparitions of what he presumed to be some form of beings, his skepticism began to lean more towards curiosity. As he stated, I was crying for the light of heaven. I did not desire communication for friends or relatives or information about earthly things. I wished to learn something about the spirit world, what the angels did, how they traveled, and the general plan of the universe. At 4 a.m. on the night of March 30th, 1870, Newbro was sleeping when he was awakened by a hand placed on his shoulder and a voice that said, "Wake up, doctor. Everything is all right. I only want to ask you a question, and we will go." Surrounding him were a host of angelic beings and a glow which illuminated his bedroom. He then heard a single representative voice instruct him that for the task which lay ahead for him, he must be pure. He must live a spiritual life, eat no flesh of any animal, and provide medical services for charity. He was to do these things for 10 years to prove his worthiness before moving on with his mission. This kind of reminded me of that other guy. Who was the guy?
Yeah, that's what I was
Paraclete story.
Yes, that's right. Individuals of stature in the community who knew Dr. Newbro vouched for his character and honesty. The morning of the encounter, Newbro confided details of the incident in a friend who believed the veracity of his story and agreed to help achieve the requirements imposed upon him. For the next 10 years, Newbro would rise early every morning before dawn to meditate and commune with God for an hour before beginning his day. He also opened a house to care for and rehabilitate alcoholics, a practice that was ahead of its time. Also, resulting from the imposed vegetarian diet, he lost 70 pounds. And, due to his experience, he also became more accepting of the idea of spiritualism. In 1877, Newbro received another audible instruction from the voice. Oddly, he was to purchase a typewriter and start practicing how to use it. Although he followed this instruction, he was frustrated by his lack of proficiency in both speed and spelling. Then, in December 1880, at 4 a.m., 10 years after his initial encounter, he was again awakened by the light in his bedroom. He immediately asked, "Am I worthy?" and received the response, "You have done well. You have passed our test." He was then instructed to place the typewriter on a table by the window, where he was to sit each morning with his hands on the keys, which would be guided, and he was not to read what was being typed until instructed to do so. Newbro did as he was instructed and later recounted, "One morning, I looked out of the window and beheld a line of light that rested on my hands, extending heavenward like a telegraph wire toward the sky. Over my head were 3 pairs of hands, fully materialized, and behind me stood another angel with her hands on my shoulders." 50 weeks after receiving the instruction, Newbro completed the 890-page tome entitled Oaspi, a Cosmon Bible in the Words of Jehovah and His Angel Ambassadors, which provides a history of mankind dating back 78,000 years as part of a cosmology of 24,000 year cycles within a 4.7 million year circuit, which the book suggests punctuated the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The book also provides a detailed history of the origins of races, mythologies, and religions, in addition to providing prophecies of future events. For this reason, Newbro's work has been compared with that of Emanuel Swedenborg. So who's that? Emanuel.
He was another He was he worked with Helena Blavatsky
Oh, okay.
in the establishment of the Oh boy, what is
Theosophical Society. Okay.
correct.
I thought it sounded familiar, but I wasn't sure. Okay. Swedenborg.
Okay.
Okay. OASP provides a very different account of the creation story and the origins of mankind on this planet. In brief, it states, nearer and nearer came the visiting stars, the Etherian ships from thousands of worlds, with countless millions of emancipated souls, dwellers in the Nirvanian regions of Jehovah, and the guardian ships were themselves like stars and carried millions of Etherian souls who had been gods and goddesses on many worlds. And they formed wings for the Houghton, or Heaven of Darkness avalanche, to hold steady the course of the Red Star, the Earth of mortals.
So the Watcher just posted up a little table here of the yugas. So the Dwapara Yuga has the Yuga Sandhya, or I don't know how to pronounce these.
Yeah, so you're pointing out that
72,000.
Yeah, it's really close. 78,000, and this one is 4.7 million years and 24,000 year cycles. Yeah.
Yeah, not exact.
Yeah, so it says a history of mankind dating back 78,000 years as part of a cosmology of 24,000 year cycles within a 4.7 million year circuit. So it's close, but not exact. 70 instead of 72 and 4.3 million year. Because those are all processional up
yeah,
there. 4, 3, 2. Yeah.
Yep.
Regarding earthly affairs, Nubro provides a fascinating account of King Luthag. Is that right?
Yes.
Luthag, an ancient ruler in Persia, who, to escape a drought, dispatched his seer to follow a spirit that leads him to an unknown fertile land we know today as Egypt. According to his account, over the following 200 years, the population of Egypt grew to over 1 million and eventually separated from Persia to become an independent kingdom led by Luthag's son and his descendants. During this period, there was a pantheon of false gods in the heavens who attempted to assert their influence on mankind. One of these false gods was Osiris, who deceived Hojax, a descendant of Luthag, proclaiming, "You are the very Thoth or Tahuti reincarnated, and behold, you shall be god of the earth." These words prompted Hojax to change his name to Thothma, God Thoth. In this regard, Nubro wrote, Thothma could hear spirits and talk with them understandingly, and to him, Osiris, through his angel servants, gave special care from his youth, granting him the power to attain the dormant state, and to see without his mortal eyes, and to hear without his mortal ears. Upon the death of his parents, expedited by Osiris, Thothma became ruler of Egypt and beseeched, "Behold, O God, I have attained to the power of the dormant state, even as the magicians who submit to be buried for 90 days. Yes, and I go hence in spirit and see many things, but my soul is like a breath of wind and goes at random." To this, Osiris responded, "Provide you me a temple, and I will come and teach you. You shall build a temple of astronomy and dedicate it to Osiris, savior of men and angels, God of heaven and earth. And it shall be built square with the world, east and west, and north and south. And the observing line shall be with the apex of the hidden vortex, which lies in the median line of the variation of the North Star. In the form of a pyramid shall you build it, measure for measure. I will show you every part."
When was this supposed to have taken place?
It sounds to me like this is... Uh-oh, just lost it. Sounds to me like this is in the Zep Tepi or...
I didn't get the reference for the dating of this, but it was after the creation of Persia, so we're not talking...
We're not talking super ancient then?
No.
Well, we're like 4,000 years, 5,000 years. What are we talking?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, just give me like a really rough number. Because I like 12,000 years ago, we were, the North Star was basically Vega, which was not very close to being a North Star. It's a little further from the pole. So it's kind of circling around the pole. if you go 6,000 years, there's like no North Star. I mean, the stars are all, there's nothing really bright or prominent that's centered on the pole. So there's not really a pole star.
Yeah, so this says, the observing line shall be within the apex of the hidden vortex, which lies in the median line of the variation of the North Star.
Okay. All right, fine. He's got it covered.
He's got it covered.
He's got it covered.
Although these claims were unverified, Nubro goes on to provide details of the construction of the pyramids of Giza, which were wholly unknown at the time. For example, he describes how logs were tied together and used as barges to float stones cut from yet undiscovered quarries in the mountains down the river for use on the plateau. 51 years before Edgar Cayce, Nubro also told of additional buildings that were connected to the pyramids via a network of tunnels that lay in ruins in a hidden chamber where King Thothma sealed manuscripts of ancient learning of extreme value where no harm could come to them. It should also be noted that, as with William Shakespeare and Joseph Smith's descriptions of foreign lands, this was done for regions he had never visited. Of this, noted scholar Max Mueller stated, "There existed no known sources from which the information given could have been obtained, and had there been such sources, it would have taken the combined life labor of 20 men to cull and edit the material." In the book, Nubro also claims that angelic beings are not a separate order in creation, but rather are elder brothers. So I want to stop there and just mention that's in the fairy lore as well. That the Fae, the She specifically, which has an interesting, I can't remember how it's spelled. It's pronounced She, but it looks like Sig, S-I-G-H, I think. They're tall and Nordic looking, and they claim to be between us and angels and more like our elder brothers, right?
That will be a recurring theme throughout this. And this book, like I said, it's 890 pages in the original version. I think there are
Did you read the whole thing?
No.
Get out of here,
I
man.
went through portions of
Come back when you're ready.
It appears very interesting. There is a lot of interesting information in it.
Yeah, sounds
And
good.
it goes into a lot of detail of explaining this relationship between these gods.
Yeah.
It refers to as these, but the way it's explained is really interesting, and it ties. I didn't want to spend too much time on this because we had a lot of material to get through, but it parallels a lot of the things that the other people mention.
Yeah.
All right.
Taking our first break?
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll be right back, continuing on with UFOs Part 9 Revelations.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. In studio with Marty. Live but not live. And yeah, we're going through. You gotta type it before you know what's in it.
What are we listening to here?
Just some rando song I made called Deep Time. I was actually working on one of Randall's blogs.
Oh, that's right.
I was listening to it and playing music
Yeah.
to go along with it.
Okay. Well, hopefully the Cosmography doesn't sue us.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so in the book, like we said, Nubro also claims that angelic beings are not a separate order in creation, but rather are elder brothers. Once mortal, they were raised in wisdom through eons of spiritual growth and experience. Likewise, there is also a great deal of text which is quite reminiscent of those of Enoch, dedicated to evil spirits which adhere to mankind. Quote, "There are many spirits in heaven who have not yet fulfilled either a spiritual or a corporeal life, and they can see but little and hear but little, for which reason I commanded that they should be called Druhas, signifying spirits of darkness, and are wandering about indifferent even to their own nakedness. And ye shall create mirrors and lenses and optical illusions and delusions and provide games and entertainments for them, so that their understanding may be opened up for the glory of my kingdoms." Unquote. So is that a quote from Nubro's book?
Yes, that's from Osby.
Okay. As peculiar and impressive as this feat of authorship was, Nubro's extraordinary abilities were not restricted to automatic typing and writing. He also displayed the ability to create oil paintings of Zarathustra, Abraham, Poe of China, Brahma of India, and many other religious leaders in total darkness with both hands simultaneously, and claimed that he could psychically read pages from any book in any library and could bring back recollections of astral travels. Much like Crowley's religion Thelema, which was spawned from the Book of the Law and received through automatic writing, by 1883, Nubro's book formed the basis for the new religion of Oahspe. Nubro moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and established Sholem, a community to care for orphaned children and to live according to the teachings of Oahspe. In 1892, influenza struck the community as Nubro struggled to treat the residents and over 50 children living there. Resulting from this, he too succumbed to the disease and died later that year. 130 years following Nubro's death, Oahspe is still in print, and the religion still possesses a small cadre of followers. And as we shall see, Nubro's teachings have had a noteworthy influence on historical events. But before we move on, allow me to leave you with this final quote from Oahspe regarding the ancients. "A fool can ridicule the ancient person. His delight is to pull down. But a wise man furnisheth a great person. To pull down the all person is to pull down his people."
He was a snake, bro.
Yes. Don't laugh at your predecessors. In 1953, 27-year-old childhood actress, model, and airline stewardess Gloria Lee, a follower of Oahspe, began receiving messages via automatic writing. In 1955, the intelligence behind those messages presented itself as a voice in her head, identifying himself as J.W. Lee was skeptical and insisted that J.W. provide her with physical proof of his existence. A few days later, J.W. instructed her to go out in her backyard in Westchester, California, where she observed a flying saucer. Lee went on to establish the Cosmon Research Foundation, which attracted approximately 2,000 followers to study J.W.'s teachings, which were published in a book dictated by him via automatic writing titled Why We Are Here. These teachings described a hierarchy of beings referred to as Space Command that resides between mankind and the divine. A second collaboration published in 1962 titled The Changing Condition of Your World also included apocalyptic prophecies. So again, this makes me think of Bramley. You know, there's always the apocalypse and it's coming soon, and then it doesn't come. And then the people either disperse and join other weird religions, or they move on and they're just like, well, you know, it's going to happen actually 20 years from now.
Right.
And it's the same thing. And I think Vallée points this out multiple times too when he's looking at, was it in Messengers of Deception when he was looking at this stuff? The UFO cults and the intelligence agencies being interested in them, infiltrating them, and how there's always these apocalyptic messages. And it's similar, like there's a space command and there's this weird mixture between we're aliens, but we're also kind of gods.
Right. Again, we're looking at patterns.
Yes.
Right.
There's patterns. Mm-hmm. So, to ensure the preservation of mankind in the fall of 1962, Lee traveled to Washington, D.C., petitioning for the construction of a space station. Not surprisingly, her proposal was ignored. Lee responded by approaching the news media with her story, stating, "I've heard from JW, and they're disturbed up there because of fighting in the world and the fact that nuclear bombs might upset their planets. The space people are going to invade the Earth and establish a peace program. JW has ordered me to go on a fast for peace until he sends a light elevator down to take me to Jupiter." It's just, what? Complying with JW's instruction, Lee remained in D.C. and began a hunger strike in her hotel room on September 13th. 66 days later, on December 3rd, she lapsed into a coma and died, leaving behind her husband and 2 young children. So again, I think what you're pointing out here is like these people believe this stuff strong enough to kill themselves with hunger.
Right. She's not trying to deceive anybody.
Right. It's not about money. She believes it. Mm-hmm. And that they are going to take her to Jupiter with a light elevator.
Well, maybe that's what happened.
Yes. That does get hinted at. So, in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 214, A History of Unlikely Coincidences, we made brief reference to a Chicago housewife named Dorothy Martin. Expressing a lifelong interest in mysticism, Martin was a follower of the teaching of Helena Blavatsky, which in turn introduced her to the religion of Oahspe. Publication of the book Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard in 1950 spawned the new religion of Scientology, whose influence spread rapidly and almost immediately attracted the attention of then middle-aged Martin, who became one of its early clears, one of Scientology's early clears. Mm-hmm. So we will return to the topic of Scientology later.
Watcher, what's the longest, like maybe Guinness Book of World Records on like not eating? Because 66 days, like I'm
it's a long hunger strike. Yeah,
like that seems too long.
Yeah, it doesn't say she doesn't eat anything. It seems like she was like maybe on a bread and water fast, and eventually you're just gonna die.
Okay,
I don't know. Okay. Due to the influences of both Oahspe and Scientology, in April 1954, Martin decided to attempt to contact her deceased father through automatic writing. And it wasn't long before she began receiving messages from the astral. She initially believed the messages were from her father, but eventually the higher force with which she was communicating revealed its identity as the elder brother, a member of the Guardians, who claimed to be spiritual beings from the planets Clarion and Ceres. He informed her that her father was in considerable need of spiritual instruction in order that he might advance to higher levels. However, she must focus her attention on the more important task of her own spiritual development. Shortly after the initial communications, Martin began receiving messages from Sananda, who professed to be the incarnation of the Savior from the Book of Revelation in this new cycle. On Easter morning, she received the message, "I am always with you. Be patient and learn, for we are there preparing the work for you as an earthly liaison before I come. You were directed to tell your experiences of my coming to you, for it prepares the way in their hearts. I will come again to teach each of you. They that have told you that they do not believe shall see us when the time is right." As an aside, it should be noted that, as discussed in Brothers of the Serpent episode 214, between 2007 and 2012, Chris Bledsoe was contacted by beings who claimed to be the guardians of creation and the lady who introduced herself as the goddess Hathor and provided him with prophetic information. Like Martin nearly 60 years before, Bledsoe was instructed by the lady on Easter Day to tell of his experience. Due to the personal ramifications he suffered as a result of his previous disclosures, he was understandably reluctant to speak of this. Given the situation, he subsequently asked the lady for a sign, reassuring him to do so. And this soon came in the form of a tree which inexplicably appeared to burn from within in his front yard. So we're getting, again, just similar symbols. Much like Bledsoe's family, Dorothy Martin's husband was unreceptive and refused to believe any of her allegations. However, she quietly confided her story to a few friends in her neighborhood. One of those friends found the information particularly interesting and introduced Martin to an informal group of housewives who met often to discuss Dianetics, Scientology, and occult topics. As a result of this, she began intermittent contact with a second group of students of Dianetics, and met Dr. Charles Lawhead,
Yes, Lawhead.
a professor at Michigan State University who also studied OSP. It should be noted for future reference that Dr. Lawhead's wife, Lillian, was documented to have been bedeviled by nightmares that featured violence and bloody death, and she could not rid herself of the obsession that her loved ones were in imminent danger of injury from sharp objects, especially knives, axes, swords, and the like. She had persistent dreams and fantasies of cuttings, stabbings, and beheadings. So why did you add that in there?
Because that has a connection to things we've discussed in the past and things we'll be discussing in the future.
Okay.
That's another pattern. That's another. This exposure to the phenomenon seems to bring out this kind of effect.
So the Watcher says that this guy, Bhagat Singh, 116 days. He went without eating.
And the next one is at 66 days, her?
That's her, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so she lasted like second longest ever?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, respect gained.
Yep.
Dr. Lawhead organized a group largely comprised of students from Michigan State who met weekly to discuss ethical, religious, metaphysical, and personal problems in search for truth. This group later became known as the Seekers. On July 23rd, Martin received a message from Sananda declaring that a flying saucer was to land upon the planet in the cast of the day of August 1st at the Lions Field. Lions? Is it Lions? Lions?
Lions Field.
Yeah. And she was to
Leo
be...
Field in August.
Yes.
Imagine that.
It's going to land at the Leo Field in August. There you go. And she was to be at the military air base by noon to witness the landing. Martin only entrusted a few of her closest associates with the information. So on the specified date, she was accompanied by only the Lawheads and 2 other acquaintances. They parked on a wide open stretch of road adjacent to the airbase, not really knowing what to expect. The reception party sat there for quite some time when suddenly Martin noticed a man walking towards them on the long straight road, seemingly from out of nowhere. One of the women became alarmed and warned Martin, "Be careful, that man is crazy." But somehow Martin felt only curiosity and sympathy for the stranger. She offered him a sandwich.
Aha, a universal offer of peace.
And a glass of fruit juice, but the man politely declined. Martin later stated, "I couldn't imagine anybody at that time of day, on a lonely highway, not wanting a cold drink." I asked him again, but he just said, "No, thank you."
Yep.
I looked at his eyes that looked through my soul, and the words sent electric currents to my feet.
Wow. I can actually relate to that. That is interesting. Wow.
As they all stood there staring at the sky in anticipation, the man would repeatedly lower his gaze to Martin and then back up again. When he turned to walk away, she thought to herself, "What can I give him to eat?" As she reached for a slice of watermelon, she looked back and the stranger was nowhere to be seen. He just seemed to have vanished, and she later recounted, "I knew something was going on that I didn't understand."
She should have offered to wash his feet.
Yeah.
They apparently accept that offer.
After a few hours, the group abandoned hope of witnessing the landing and decided to pack up and head back home. Martin was particularly disillusioned as she felt responsible for unintentionally misleading the group. But on the drive back home, she couldn't help but think of the stranger on the side of the road and asked the Lawheads about their impressions. They all agreed that something had happened on that roadside, but they, quote, "didn't know what it was or how to explain it. We were all sensitized to that degree that something had happened, though we had no mental concept of it," unquote. The next morning, Martin received a surprising message which read, "It was I, Sananda, who appeared on the roadside in the guise of the Sais." At that moment, she began to recognize the significance of a story relayed to her by Sananda previously on July 28th. In this obscure story, 2 children named Sarah and Justine, while on a journey, were overtaken by a coy little Sais, which was a mink disguised as a rabbit who was the cousin of the grouse. At the conclusion of the story, the gates of the treasure of the kingdom swung open, where the greatest of all treasures were found, the Seiss in the garden, where he was only the Seiss, no cousins, no ancestry. He was just Mr. Seiss, who was himself, as the girl and boy, each in his creator's garden. It was at that point that Martin finally recognized that the Seiss was the Guardian's term for one who comes in disguise, or one whose true identity is unknown. Although there had not been a saucer landing that day, Martin believed a greater gift had been bestowed upon her. She had entertained a divine being in disguise and performed the simple Christian act of offering hospitality to the casual, undistinguished stranger.
Wow.
The communications with the Guardians continued, and Martin was informed of an eons-long war between opposing factions in the universe, forces of light and dark. She was instructed that the leader of the dark forces was in disguise and has been leading our contemporary scientists in their construction of ever greater weapons of destruction. She then began to receive messages predicting a great cataclysm in the form of a shift of Earth's crust, causing a massive tidal wave that would wash over North America. So I can kind of...
Which year is this?
1954.
I remember reading about this. Didn't she cause a big stir about this?
Yes.
Yeah. This would have a cascading... What are their maps and everything? Or is that somebody else?
Well, yeah, we'll get to that part of the
Okay.
story. There were other people involved.
Yeah. So this would have a cascading effect, causing enormous geological changes around the globe. The apocalypse was scheduled for midnight on December 22nd, 1954, which is real close to the winter solstice there. Be that as it may, Martin was reassured that the Guardians would arrive in flying saucers shortly before midnight to whisk away their disciple Martin and her followers.
So sorry. So Hapgood's book came out in 1958. What was this?
This was 54.
54.
54. Huh.
You think old Hapgood was channeling stuff too?
Damn, I missed that.
So let's see. Well, he published I guess the Piri Reis map of 1513 in 1962. I was just curious if like Hapgood, if
Yeah.
she was influenced by that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds
No,
like
this
it's the
was
other way
before.
around. Yeah. Well, I mean, Hapgood was doing map research, so he was probably
Yeah.
working on that stuff for years.
That's what I
and
mean.
years.
Before he publishes the actually book,
Yeah.
the Earth's shifting crust. But I don't know. It's right around the same time
Yeah.
that he's been working on this stuff.
Of course, remember, we're
Great
talking...
Mysteries of Earth, 1960.
We're-
Piri Reis map, 1962. So
But we're talking also pre-internet days, so it's not like information,
Yeah.
was disseminated the
they're
way it is
published
today.
books. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but I wonder back then when a book was published, how quickly did it get into the... I mean, this was 4 years before the book was published, but still, even then, how long, I wonder, would it take for there to be like a bestseller back then?
Yeah. Okay. I want to back up, actually, back to this encounter, because there's definitely a like a bias happening here to Martin. She's told that a flying saucer is going to land, and it doesn't.
Right.
She does meet this weird dude, and then she's like, "Oh, that's what it was supposed to be." I'm just like, "Come on, they already lied to you, or they didn't
Yeah.
do what they were going to say."
Right.
But you're like so invested at this point, right? That you're like, "Oh, this is what they meant." No, like if you were told a flying saucer was going to land on the planet, at Lyon's Field, and it completely doesn't take place.
Right. This
Unless she's decided, well, the saucer was invisible and like this guy, I don't know. I'm just telling you, there's some kind of like
this is probably
confirmation bias.
Right. A point that needs to be made a little later, because I think we need to give a few more examples of this. But there is a school of thought that people need something like this.
Some kind of confirmation.
Right. There's something
But they're
in
always
their psyche that they need to always feel that there's something there, God or whatever. In other words, that they need something to grasp onto, and that they will make any excuse to not lose that connection.
Yeah.
But I'll make an argument in defense of this. Doesn't she get the message through the channeling
Yes.
and the automatic writing?
Yeah.
So that's either saying
Maybe
that they lied, or that her translations or the automatic writing is not completely accurate.
Yeah, okay. So
Like in her mind, she's like, okay, it's going to be a flying saucer. Well, you're in you're in the 50s, and there's this whole thing about flying saucers.
And she already believes that they're like whatever, the guardians of Earth or something.
Yeah. So that could
guardians
be
of
an
the
argument
universe.
you could make.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so because I have heard that one of the problems with automatic writing is that it has to be translated through the psyche of the person. Even though they're not in control of the writing, there's some influence. So it has to come out in your language. I'm just saying, like, if it's like flying saucer will land, go to this air base, and then you go there and no flying saucer lands, you're just like, okay,
Right.
you lied. And I would say she says, so another scenario is like, she says she receives this message from Sananda. Sananda tells her through automatic writing that a flying saucer is going to land and she should go see it. Flying saucer fails to land. Something else comes walking up to her that is odd. Definitely, it's weird. It's a very interesting encounter. And then that thing leaves without ever saying what it is or what he is. And then she gets another message from Sananda being like, oh, yeah, that was totally me.
Yes.
Swear to God. Just forget that the flying saucer didn't land. That dude was me. And like, that thing could have been stopping the flying saucer from landing and coming to visit her as a real angel or whatever you want to think of, right? It prevents the bad shit from taking place, but she allows that it's like, oh yeah, that was me. I
Yeah,
promise.
there is definitely
yeah.
the trickster aspect.
Yeah, there's a
of
trickster
all this.
aspect.
Yes.
So and like she's being told that there's a war between light and dark,
Right.
right? And like doesn't see that here's a big problem in like you're already being told this. So if you believe there's a war between light and dark, well, that right there, the fact that the thing you're talking to failed to come through,
Well, what happens in
and then tries to claim that it
right.
was, I'm just like, come on.
What happens in many of these cases is that they are fed information that is verified. It's verifiable
Absolutely,
information,
yeah.
and they buy in. They go
believe
all,
it,
and
and
once
then they completely lied to
right,
them.
right.
Yeah.
They cross that threshold and they go all in.
Yes, that's
and
right.
once they're so vested in this belief,
Yeah.
it's difficult for them to see anything other.
Yeah.
Like
They talk themselves into
Right,
believing
exactly.
that it was like a mistake on their part, or I'm just like, no, you're being lied to. But yes, you're right. Sometimes, and I think Valet points this out as well, probably in Messengers of Deception. He's like, so many times these UFO cults or these people who get involved in these, they do receive predictions that are totally accurate, but they're like inconsequential. They're like, oh yeah, there's going to be, this is going to happen somewhere. And they're like, holy crap, it did happen. And then after that, they believe everything they're told and they cause all this mayhem and the stuff doesn't come to pass.
right.
It's,
We're going to see a few other examples of this.
yeah, I know you got examples coming up.
Right, more extreme examples.
Yes, right. Let's see, where was I? Okay.
The other
scroll
thing
back
about
up here.
this type of stuff is that how many times did they, air quotes, receive some message that completely didn't pan out at all? They don't talk about those. Like
Right.
you don't like, well, I got this message and then it was like didn't happen.
Yeah.
Or you
Well,
see
the
what I'm saying?
ones we know about are where they came out and they were like, this is going to take place because I've been told.
Well,
Right, that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about
You're right. How many times did they
like
get- yeah.
because of the confirmation bias, like
Yeah.
the people tell the stories that are the most compelling.
Yeah, right.
So you're not hearing about all the channeling and all of the stuff that didn't work out.
Yeah.
It didn't make cogent messages.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense, or it didn't happen at all, or it was completely wrong.
Yeah. That's true. Okay, so she began to receive the messages about a shift of the Earth's crust, cause a massive tidal wave. But the Guardians are going to arrive in flying saucers and save them. So she hesitantly informs the Seekers, which is that other group, so that they may quietly begin their preparations. However, Dr. Lawhead felt it was his moral duty to alert the world, and he proceeded to send out 50 copies of a 7-page document titled Open Letter to American Editors and Publishers, in which he warned of the impending cataclysm. This story received a great deal of attention and forced the Seekers to restrict new membership while many of them quit their jobs, and Martin became increasingly paranoid, refusing to leave her house. So they basically, this guy causes a media storm.
Right. And maybe I didn't make that clear in the way I wrote this, but she was not seeking publicity.
Right.
It was the people around her that kind of ran with it.
Yeah. And when I'm reading through this, like, obviously I've got hindsight plus the outsider's view. I'm like, this is what they wanted.
Right.
Whatever this force, this is what they wanted. Right. Mm-hmm. So when the day came, Martin and the Seekers were met by a large cadre of reporters from the media. At 11:15, Martin receives a message from Sananda with instructions that her followers are to remove all metal from their bodies, including zippers and bra underwires. Everyone waited anxiously in the cold until 3 a.m. before it was finally announced that the flying saucers were surveying Earth's fault lines and the evacuation would be delayed until midnight on December 25th. On Christmas Eve, a crowd of about 200 arrived on the scene before the police broke up the gathering after approximately 20 minutes. But the day was otherwise uneventful. As discussed previously, while in Mexico the following year, the Lawheads were later met Dr. Andrea Puharich, and shortly after relayed a message to him received by Martin from the Nine, a mysterious conglomerate of deities alleged to have been comprised of the Egyptian pantheon. This story is one of the earliest modern UFO cults was detailed in the book When Prophecy Fails by Leon Festinger, published in 1956. And the information was obtained surreptitiously infiltrating the group. And this study led to the development of the theory of cognitive dissonance. So it is especially important to emphasize that the researchers conducting the study concluded that Dorothy Martin was not lying and truly believed that she was a chosen messenger of a higher intelligence. So this further illustrates the lengths to which people ensnared in the phenomenon will go to abide by their convictions. So yeah, that's what we were just talking about. Like they're showing cognitive dissonance. I'm saying there's also the bias is there. Like they're determined to continue to believe the story. Right. So they only see what they want to see, or they'll make up excuses for the.
That's what I'm saying. The part about we're surveying the Earth's fault lines sounds like a complete lie.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
But when you've invested your whole life in this, and now the media is all around you, and it's like my question is what is the purpose?
Right. Why would somebody humiliate themselves? I'm not even asking about Martin. What's the purpose of the phenomenon? Why is the phenomenon doing this? It didn't achieve anything, did it? Like what did they get out of this? Are they just galactic trolls?
They're just making the broader populace think it's total BS. Right. I mean,
yes,
if you were to say that like this is external forces at work, then yeah, they're just trying to make most people completely laugh in the face of anybody who makes legitimate claims.
Okay. That's a great point.
Yeah. These get yet more bizarre, though.
But
we'll get to that, Marty.
It's like my thought is that the claim about surveying the Earth's fault lines and stuff sounds like
you're just like, come on.
That sounds like a lie created by the people that caused the event to happen.
You think
that's just like an excuse.
And Martin are just like, oh, they're
I just got a new message. Just got a new message.
Yeah, because they're totally embarrassed that nothing's happening. Yeah.
Because
that's completely
you're
possible.
There until 3 a.m. It's like, well, why didn't they just tell you like, well, first we're going to come down and survey the fault lines?
Yeah.
No, it's
So that it could be both, because they're also obviously receiving complete BS messages from these things. But I agree. It could be them just being extremely embarrassed. I mean, she was already embarrassed by bringing out already true believers to not see a flying saucer.
It makes me distrust these people, because you would think they would just say, we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why it didn't happen.
Right.
Like if they're.
Why didn't they just be like, well, they lied to me?
Yeah, there you go.
Now I'm not going to believe anything they say, because this is complete BS.
That's what I'm talking about.
I guess we could also say we don't know how many times that has happened.
Yeah, that's true. How many times have people been like, I don't believe you. You're not surveying any fault lines.
Or how many people have received messages that never go public?
Right.
Why don't you transmit the data about the fault lines? I'd like to know what they're doing.
Let's I'll sit down and write a whole paper on the fault lines.
Just send me all your data.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Second hour, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. UFOs Part 9, Revelations. I am reading text written by Marty that he has put together through a bunch of research. How many episodes of these do you think we're going to do? Is it just unending?
We just keep it going.
Never, it's
27.
the gift that keeps on giving.
37. Yeah. I remember when we first started this, we're like, well, it might take a couple episodes to cover all this stuff. And here we are, episode 9, part 9. And that was, by the way, Call on the Fire, an older song by Kyle, listening to a piece of it.
Yep. The old bridge.
Mm-hmm. All right. So is this Laverne?
Yes.
Laverne Landis was a registered nurse and mother of 5 living in St. Paul, Minnesota. Although she had a long-standing interest in psychic phenomena, she was described by friends and coworkers as extremely stable. Soon after her husband's death in 1975, her interest in the paranormal intensified, and she, along with her friend Gerald Flash, or is that right? Flack? Yeah. Flack? Flash, joined the Search and Prove Psychic Research Organization in Afton, Minnesota, headed by Jerry Gross, who was dedicated to the study of spirit contact through meditation and astral projection. Gerald Flack was an electrician, described by friends and neighbors as a very intelligent, grounded electrician, and gentle person. However, those who were close to him recognized a rapid change in his personality as he mysteriously became obsessed with UFOs. On November 15th, 1982, a passing driver found Flack semi-conscious on the verge of death from hypothermia on the Gunflint Trail near the shore of Lake Superior, northwest of Marseille, Minnesota. Police subsequently found Landis dead in the front seat of her car a few hundred feet from the main road. An autopsy showed she died of a combination of hypothermia, dehydration, and starvation. Based on the information obtained by Sheriff's Deputy Kenneth Carlson upon Flack regaining consciousness in the hospital, Carlson stated, Flack said he had been receiving messages through Ms. Landis from some higher power. The most recent message directed them to go to the end of Gunflint Trail and await further messages. A police investigation revealed that the pair had left their homes and families on May 17th and proceeded to drive through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota, seeking contacts with spirits and UFOs until they reached the end of Gunflint Trail on October 5th. As instructed, the pair then remained there for nearly 6 weeks, attempting to survive only on vitamins and water. When asked why they had done so, Flack responded that they were supposed to be picked up by a flying saucer. So again, they starved themselves to death.
Waiting for the
That shows you how strong they believe this. Waiting for a flying saucer that never comes. In 1989, specialists Vance Davis...
Or it came for her and not for him.
Right. And left her body there. Well, and the other thing is like... So we were talking in the break about, what is this aliens pretending to be gods? Is it spirit stuff spoofing itself as aliens? But it can also be both. Like it could be some evil spiritual thing, because this is like we're still talking about some kind of spiritualist movement, meditation, channeling, right? So you can imagine that you get messages from evil entities that aren't aliens; they're just something else. But they're using the popular idea of aliens.
And like we
But
discussed,
why would you just kill people? Like, what's the point? I don't understand.
as we discussed outside, that they initially present themselves as relatives.
Yeah, they start
very
out.
often,
Yeah.
and then
I'm your grandfather.
evolves.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Just bring the typewriter with you, just in case the plan changes.
yeah. And again, we've been making comparisons to the fairy folklore, and they're similar. The idea that there's this weird crossover with dead relatives in the Fae folklore. Mm. People are tricked into following the Fae out into the woods to never return by voices of their grandfather or a dead relative or something.
It is weird, though, if you think about the contrast here. Like, you have the group of people that gathers around waiting for the UFO, and then at 3 a.m, they're like, okay, the plan changed, they're coming back later.
Yeah.
Then you have these two people who go and stay there for 6 weeks with no message that says the plan has changed.
Yeah. Just starve themselves
And
to
so
death.
they're just like, well, we have to stay.
Yeah.
So it's like, if they were fooling themselves into thinking that they were actually channeling something, why didn't a message come that said, oh, okay, we can go home, it's not happening,
Yeah.
to save their own lives? It's like, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
So it kind of, if they were fooling themselves, you would think that they would fool themselves
Into
to go
saying
back
we
home.
can go home. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Good point. I don't know. I think that to me it's more likely that these people are actually in communication with something that's fooling them rather than that they are fooling themselves or that they're just making it up, which is what the scriptards say. This is also something we were talking about in the break.
This next one is a very good example of that.
Yeah.
They are at least fooling themselves in one respect, and that is that they're believing
Yes.
everything.
That's right. Yeah. In 1989, specialists Vance Davis, Kenneth Beeson, Sergeant Annette Eccleston, and Privates First Class Michael Huckstady, Chris Perlock, and William Setterberg were each serving as cryptographers at the 701st Military Intelligence Brigade, the NSA's high-security listening post located in Augsburg in West Germany. Living on base had a tendency to get quite monotonous. So, during their time off, this group did what any reasonable red-blooded Americans would do. They spent their free time at the strip club. Oh, wait. Researching the paranormal. Sorry. They delved into various alleged methods of communication with spirits and were skeptical of many of the claims. Finally, in December of 1989, they decided to test one of these methods, largely with the intent of illustrating its spurious nature. It should be noted that this group of very intelligent, high-level NSA analysts, all with top-secret security clearances, approached this endeavor as scientifically as possible, and no drugs or alcohol were involved. The group began their experimentation with an Ouija board. Beeson and Davis held the planchette, while others took careful notes and made tape recordings. Initial tests garnered no significant results, presumably because the group did not take the experiment seriously. However, as they began to take the practice more earnestly, messages began to emerge. They began receiving communications from what they claimed was an energetic spirit that relayed information to them. Initially, the spirit used a nickname unknown to any of the participants, but Beeson would soon learn from his father that this was the nickname by which his grandfather was known when he was young. So there again is Marty's point that they start out, with ties to dead relatives. But this was not Beeson's first alleged encounter with the paranormal. According to his sworn statement, at the age of 5, he was laying in bed when a ghost appeared and handed him a glass of water because he was thirsty. And he would later go on to frequently receive vivid visions of Armageddon. So are you just pointing out there the similar,
Yes, again,
it's apocalyptic, death and carnage, destruction.
Encounters tend to have side effects. And almost
one of the side effects is visions of cataclysms.
Cataclysms and horrific dreams.
Okay.
That's like a definite pattern.
Okay. As the group continued their Ouija board sessions, they began receiving information from another entity who identified herself as Sapphire, who would alert them of world-altering events to come. To test the validity of these predictions, the group asked for short-term verification, and one of these came in the form of a prediction of an earthquake that would occur in Tehran in Iran. 3 days later, a 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck the area, killing and injuring as many as 150,000 residents. Next was the prediction of an imminent war in Iraq, relayed 3 weeks before Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait on August 2nd, 1990, which prompted the Gulf War. These, along with other major and minor predictions, convinced the group that they were truly in communication with some form of higher intelligence. As Davis stated, he began to sense that the lines of demarcation between the physical world and the spiritual one were beginning to blur. But this was not David's first brush with the bizarre either. While on a bus en route to his prior assignment at Fort Meade, Davis met a woman on board who inexplicably called him by name and said to him, "God showed me that you will help change the world." Back in Germany, the group began receiving messages from other spirits until ultimately from the Blessed Virgin Mary. Included in these communications were a great number of long-term predictions of events, such as the LA riots, a terrorist bombing in New York City, as well as even more grave cataclysmic events culminating in the rapture as predicted in the Book of Revelations. The group was warned that these events would be the result of a conflict between two opposing alien factions in orbit and or under the Earth, who were in telepathic communication with a select number of humans. These two factions were said to be the Alliance, who believed in free will, and the Others, who were systematically abducting and medically experimenting on humans. In this regard, an entity who identified herself as Kia informed the group that in 1998, which is 3 times his number 666. Now, I checked this math, and he's right. 666 times 3 is 1998. A false messiah would arise to bring about this apocalypse. Kia claimed to be Davis's guardian, who was the commander of one of the ships, who were sent to rescue the elect so that they may fulfill their roles and destroy the Antichrist.
Quickly, that's now the third reference to guardian.
Yes, right.
And the elect, if you remember back to deconstructing demons, we were talking about what did they call themselves? The Society of the Elect.
Yep.
So
Society
these
of the
same
Elect.
references keep popping up.
So all the while, the group took extensive... Oh, so just to be clear, they were saying in 1998 that the Antichrist was going to show up, right, and bring about the apocalypse. They called it a false messiah.
Correct.
And that's why that point about the year 1998 being also the number that's 3 times 666.
That's not when the world was going to end. That was when it was going to begin. That's when
the end was going to start.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Or when he was going to show up. Yeah. Right.
Watcher, figure out some characters in 1998 that rose to power. Hey, I have an aside.
reference to one.
Okay, you got one? This is just an aside. You mentioned the rapture, and it just occurred to me. This is not really on topic necessarily, but I've been looking at the comparison of a lot of these ancient stories to the cataclysms that took place, like at the end of the Younger Dryas, that kind of thing. So the rapture is like everyone that gets taken in the cataclysm, right? Everyone that's left behind, those are the survivors that are staying in hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like the wasteland that they're left in.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So it's like that could be still a memory of people who survived the cataclysm. Like, they were taken.
Yeah.
God came down and took them, right? And we were left here in this hell.
I may be mistaken, but I believe that is part of OASP. That exact thing, that there's this cycle.
Yeah.
And the remnants are the ones that are...
But in that story, it's the good guys who get taken.
That's what I mean.
And the ones who get left are the bad guys.
Yeah.
Where it's like, Noah's like, oh, hold on, we're the good guys.
Yeah.
No. All those people who died were the bad guys.
Right. Yeah. So there's two ways of looking at it. Like, but you can see that the people that were left behind have to remain in this utter wasteland.
Oh, yeah. The absolute wasteland.
That's just, I mean, in survival at that point, when all your civilization that you're used to is gone, must be a living hell.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare to live through.
Yeah.
So you're like, what did we do wrong?
Right. Yeah.
It's just, you can see that it might be looked at in both ways by the people who survived and also people looking back, and writing the histories. But the other thing I was going to say is that I've also had a lot of apocalyptic dreams, like many apocalyptic dreams, but I remember thinking, I guess when I started having them, that, this could happen, right? This is going to happen. Those ideas. And now I kind of look at it more or less like this is what my life has become, is looking into apocalypse. Like that's become a huge part of my life. And the thing that I'm interested in and studying is these historical events. And so I just found that to be interesting, that like my interests have sort of just gone into this whole apocalyptic history.
But did those dreams begin before or after your encounter on the side of the road?
Oh, I can't say. I don't know, because I didn't start writing dreams down until then. That's when I started writing dreams down. And I've had a lot since then, but I don't know. I think I definitely had some apocalyptic visions before that.
And I can say that this is kind of funny too. I've also had apocalyptic dreams, and we've talked about this, but in my apocalyptic dreams, I never know what's going on, and Kyle always does.
That's right.
My apocalyptic dreams is like stuff starts suddenly going down, and Kyle like seems to know exactly what's happening. And he's completely prepared, and I'm running around like, what the fuck? What are we doing? What is happening? And he's like got all this equipment, and he knows exactly what's going on, and I end up following him around.
I have not had an apocalyptic dream.
Really?
No. I'm very, even in my sleep, I'm very analytical. My dreams are like structured.
That explains a lot, Marty.
Yeah.
I just never have. They've never made me think like, oh, this is about to happen on this date, or anything
they don't
like
give
that.
you a time.
Yeah.
No, it's never like that. To me, they're always shocking, but if it is something in the future, it's always been like this. This might happen in my lifetime or something. Like I get the feeling overall that like in my lifetime, I might see some apocalypse. That's what I used to think. But more so now, I think like this is part of my life, like looking into the apocalypse, and what it means.
Yeah. Okay. So all the while, While receiving these messages, the group took extensive notes totaling over 1,500 pages obtained during sessions up to 8 hours in duration. Davis further alleges that through all of their spirit communications, there was not a single misspelled word conveyed through the Ouija board. To prepare for the coming events, the group was instructed to leave Europe where the conflict would begin and to seek shelter in the mountains of New Mexico. These individuals were well aware of the likely consequence of their desertion, but so convinced were they of the prophecies that they all agreed to follow the instructions, each leaving behind a copy of a letter dictated by the spirits explaining the requirement for them to do so, which was to be, quote, forwarded to the highest possible command, unquote. So just to reiterate here, these people are all like military people in the NSA. They're crypto analysts.
Right. Very high level. They
high level, top secret clearances, and they decide to go AWOL.
Right. These are above
And so what was the
average-
messages for?
That the Antichrist was going to show up, and these people needed to leave Europe where they were stationed at a base and go to New Mexico and prepare for the end of the world.
But the messages they left behind.
They left. I've got a copy of the and I'll post.
Who are they
I'll
for?
post it in the
I
Discord.
just
it
didn't-
just said forwarded to the highest possible
they-
command of the military.
Okay.
Yeah.
explaining their reasons.
Their reason for their
leaving.
AWOL.
And it talks about the coming apocalypse. And
Okay.
it goes into their law. It's long, a lot of detail.
According to Beeson's sworn statement, which contradicts the official reports. Now, what does that mean?
The dates are not consistent.
Okay. The group departed Germany on July 6 of 1990, arriving back on U.S. soil in Atlanta, where he and Hucksteady connected with another flight to Knoxville, Tennessee. Once there, they were picked up by a friend who helped them take delivery of a Volkswagen van that they had purchased online. They then headed to Chattanooga, where they met the other 4 members of the group on July 9th.
Wait a minute. They got a Volkswagen van.
Yeah. Those freaking
Oh my
hippies.
God. Okay. I'm getting the picture here.
We promise it's going to be the apocalypse, man. So at that point, they headed south to Gulf Breeze, Florida, before proceeding on to New Mexico. So why are they going to all these places?
Well, that'll be explained.
Okay. Upon the discovery of their desertion, an all-points bulletin was sent out for the 6 missing operatives who were listed as armed and dangerous. The reason for meeting in Gulf Breeze was equally intriguing. Gulf Breeze was the location of the highly publicized Ed Walters UFO case, which began in December of 1987, and it was also host to MUFON's 21st annual symposium on July 6th through 8th. However, the real reason for heading to Gulf Breeze was that Beeson had previously been stationed at nearby NAS Pensacola and was in love with a local psychic named Anna Foster, who worked at a local New Age bookstore and was coincidentally also involved in the Ed Walters case. As if that were not coincidental enough, when Beeson's partner Davis was a teenager, he had received precognitive visions of his soulmate, which were etched into his memory. And when the group arrived at Foster's home, Davis immediately recognized Foster's roommate, Diana, as the woman in his visions over a decade before. On July 14th, 5 days after their arrival, Hucksteady was pulled over by a police officer in Gulf Breeze for a broken taillight. After failing to produce a driver's license, the officer radioed in his name and soon discovered that Hucksteady was wanted on charges of desertion, and he was immediately arrested. As the officer began doing so, Hucksteady stated, "You don't know what you're doing. If you take me in, you have signed my death warrant." That's not going to work. Remarkably, when they arrived at the police station, the officer was informed that within 5 minutes of Hucksteady's arrest, Police Chief Brown received a call from the Pentagon instructing that the prisoner was not to be charged nor interrogated, and no one should be allowed to speak with him until the military police arrived to collect him. Well, that makes sense. They had top secret clearances.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Pentagon's probably like, what is going on here? They've got this crazy UFO story, but are they like
Are they spies?
double agents?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Soon after Hucksteady's arrest, the other 4 males were apprehended at Foster's home, and Eccleston was arrested camping on a beach nearby. Once Pentagon officials were on the scene, the Doomsday Six, or Gulf Breeze Six, as they became more commonly known, were sent to Fort Benning in Georgia, where they were held in solitary confinement and interrogated by both CIA and NSA officials. And we might have been driving past that base while they were there.
That's right.
Meanwhile, reports of the ordeal began hitting the newswire, claiming that the defectors were members of a group named End of the World. On July 20th, the Northwest Florida Daily News ran the story heading, 6 AWOL soldiers say they aimed to kill Antichrist. The Gulf Breeze Six were then sent to Fort Knox military base, where they were scheduled to undergo 3 weeks of further interrogation in preparation for their court-martial. However, this is where the story takes yet another bizarre turn. On July 25th, several major news outlets received the following unsigned message, along with 2 photographs. 2. ABC, NBC, CBS, AP, and UPI, U.S. Army. Free the Gulf Breeze 6. We have the missing files, the box of 500 plus photos, and the plans you want back. Here is proof with close-ups cut out. Next, we send the close-ups, and then everything, unless they are released. Answer code, and then there's a long code here. On July 26th, less than 24 hours after the receipt of the message, newspapers carried the headline, UFO soldiers won't face court-martial. And the following day, July 27th, all 6 were discharged from Fort Knox with full honors. This highly publicized incident was obviously an embarrassment to the military and intelligence community. So following their release, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, protested their absolvement, and they were subsequently reduced to the lowest rank and forfeited half a month's pay, or what might be considered a mild slap on the wrist, given the gravity of the charges laid against them.
I didn't put this in there, but according to Davis, and I couldn't verify this, but according to him, Senator Bob Dole and President George Bush Sr. are the ones that
Signed the release
for them. Yes, for them to be released.
So doesn't that
What
make
year was this that this happened?
in 1990?
Oh my gosh.
Doesn't this, them receiving this message, doesn't this make it sound like a whole intelligence op of a different country? You know, like,
There's
it
extortion going
makes
on
me
here.
feel like the entire UFO story and all that other stuff is a giant cover for what they were actually doing.
But why would they care?
Oh.
Why would another country care whether these people went to prison?
I don't. Yeah, that's the question. Is like, why do they want them freed? But somebody is. It implies that somebody's blackmailing the government for the release of these people with photos and plans that have been stolen.
There are some really curious details that we'll be covering in the next episode that relate to this, that might color the picture slightly differently, but there's other factors that make it hard to argue. Like, if you were going to say this was
I'd say Anna Foster and the roommate are also agents, sleepers.
right, but well,
I don't know. I'm just saying, man.
right. But as you complete this,
That guy told somebody about the woman of his dreams, and the CIA found out, and they just made sure that she walked in the door.
well, it worked.
Yes, because upon their release, Beeson went on to marry Anna Foster, and Davis did marry his soulmate, Foster's roommate, Diana, just as he was shown in the visions he says he had as a teenager. And I'll put that in there, that he said he had. Because again, like, we're getting all this after the fact, you know, so he's like, oh, I had a vision of this woman back when I was a teenager. Whatever, dude. You know, sleeper agents. Maybe this has been planned out. I don't know. But that telegram or whatever it is, this message makes me really doubt that there is any UFOs involved in this at all. Or, well, I guess not UFOs, but channeling or anything.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
The earthquake prediction for Iran.
But isn't that don't we also learn about that after the fact?
No, they actually they document their.
So there's documented proof
yeah.
that before the earthquake happened, they thought that they had received information, and we can say like that definitely was before the earthquake took place.
In the documents, only some of which have been released.
Okay.
Through Freedom of Information.
Yeah, because again, you can make all kinds of claims like, oh, we received predictions about the
all
earthquake.
All these decades
and the Gulf War.
later, they're still have stuck to their story.
Okay, still. All right. Although approximately 1,400 of the 1,600 documents related to the case remain classified, it was later determined that by June 29th, a week before their desertion, the phones of the Gulf Breeze 6 had been tapped. In fact, Davis later states in his book Unbroken Promises, which details the entire incident, "What we didn't realize at the time was that the government had known of our plans and had an operative on the plane with us, just as Sapphire had told us." Sapphire being the entity that they were in communication with through the Ouija board.
Yes.
"And they lost us when we arrived in Atlanta, just as she had assured us they would." Sapphire is also a great Russian operative name. This was yet another example of a prediction from the netherworld that the Gulf Breeze 6 believe ultimately came true, and to this day they have never wavered from their version of events. So, groups such as the Seekers, the Cosmon Research Foundation, Search and Prove, and End of the World are often referred to as UFO cults. But these are far from isolated examples of large groups of people who believe they have been in contact with non-human intelligence. Although not a UFO cult per se, I Am Activity was an organization founded in the 1930s by Guy Ballard in Chicago, Illinois. I Am Activity was comprised of followers of the Theosophy of Helena Blavatsky. While hiking on Mount Shasta, seeking to make contact with the Great White Brotherhood, otherwise known as the Invisible Church or Ascended Masters, a group of perfected beings of great power who spread spiritual teachings through selected humans, Ballard claimed to have communicated with the Ascended Master Saint Germain, the Comte Saint Germain. In 1955, George King founded the Aetherius Society in London, England. Also based on the principles of Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy, this group claimed to be in communication with the Interplanetary Parliament and claimed to be heavily engaged in apocalyptic struggles against black magicians seeking to enslave the earth. I love how the wording changes. Now that we're talking to some people in England, it's the Interplanetary Parliament, right? In 1956, Charles Boyd Gensel founded Mark Age, a group dedicated to channeling messages from the spiritual government of the solar system. One of their contacts was purported to be none other than Gloria Lee, who after her passing was apparently able to catch that light elevator and communicate the message, "Hello, everybody. This is Gloria. Yes, it's really me. I'm really finding out how this thing works." So this is the woman who...
It's not much different than, a couple thousand years ago. It was the kingdom of heaven.
That's right. You're right. Now it's the parliament of
Now
heaven.
it's the parliament of the planetary system.
The parliament of the solar system, oh boy.
Yep, it's always portrayed as being governments.
Yeah.
Whatever governments, kingship came down from heaven and
That's
whatnot.
right.
So
That's right. And there's always the war and the warriors. We are the guardians of the whatever. Yeah. And we're protecting everything from bad people.
Yeah.
Okay. In 1957, Gabriel Green initiated the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Club of America.
I was just thinking, eventually you'll have, the UFO cult will change and become mono UFOic or something, and it'll be like it's the speaker of speakers.
That's right.
Instead of the king of kings.
Yeah, the speaker of speakers. There you go. And so the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Club of America, Gabriel Green claimed to have made telepathic contact with the Space Masters and the Great White Brotherhood and the spiritual hierarchy of Earth. At its peak, the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Club of America had over 5,000 members in 24 countries, which makes it not of America anymore. In 1973, French journalist Claude something claimed he was abducted by aliens in France. On board their spaceship, he was told that he was chosen to spread the message of the Elohim, an alien species who created life on this planet. He was informed that prophets such as Jesus and Muhammad were hybrids of Elohim and human parentage. In pursuit of this calling, Claude established the religion of Raelism, which although following certain Catholic doctrines, was instead polytheistic and expressed a belief in intelligent design by extraterrestrial gods through the use of scientific knowledge and advanced technology.
First question. Why did you make mosquitoes?
This doctrine also teaches that mankind is currently in the age of apocalypse and must now choose whether to use science and technology to enhance life or to use it to fulfill the prophecy of Revelation. It is estimated that realism currently has approximately 100,000 members worldwide. Honming Chen was a sociology professor at the College of Pharmacology and Science in Taiwan. As a child, Chen claimed the ability to receive divine messages in the form of a golden ball or orb hovering in front of him. Later, as an adult, he came to recognize this gift of religious significance. He came to recognize this as a gift of religious significance. Chen went on to establish the religion of Chen Tao, the True Way, an offshoot of the quasi-academic group Chinese Soul Light Research Association. Chen Tao combined Buddhism with Christian millennialism or apocalyptic prophecy, New Age spirituality, and demonology. Its doctrine taught that Earth is dominated by evil extraterrestrial spirits which intervene in human affairs and which would ultimately bring about the apocalypse. But those who accepted the truth of Revelation would be rescued, taken aboard spaceships disguised as clouds that would land in early 1999. Further adding that flying saucers were the divine means of travel, the kingship. Mm-hmm. Total annihilation of Earth would occur 44 years later in 2043, resulting from a nuclear world war triggered by a war between Taiwan and China. Did we start that?
Yeah, we're out of time.
Okay. Let's take a break.
Page 12 of a 23-page document. And we are in the final segment of the final hour here. I think we're going to finish right on time, says Marty.
Marty thinks we can do it. So, Chen predicted that God would materialize on Earth in human form on March 31st of 1998. Coincidentally, this is the same year that the Gulf Breeze 6 were told that a false messiah would arrive to bring forth the apocalypse. A seemingly unfulfilled prophecy, or was it? Meanwhile, in 1992, on the other side of the border in China, Li Hongzhi established the religious movement Falun Gong, which combines Buddhist and Taoist traditions with a belief in extraterrestrial intervention. Hongzhi believes that he was sent by extraterrestrial beings to assist mankind to escape destruction as the result of the unbridled evil which now permeates this world. Falun Gong teaches that humans were originally innately good, but descended into a state of delusion and suffering after acquiring karma, and that modern science and hybridization are ploys by evil beings who now walk the earth to assimilate mankind. Estimates are that today there are as many as 70 million practitioners of Falun Gong in China. Now we must regrettably go back to one of the earliest organizations, which we believe many listeners might be surprised to learn is by definition also categorized as a UFO cult. In 1930, Wallace Fard Muhammad founded the Nation of Islam in Detroit, Michigan, based on the belief that the material universe was created by the first in a succession of mortal gods, each named Allah. This god created an original divine race of humans, the tribe of Shabazz, who inhabited Egypt's Nile Valley, as well as the area surrounding Mecca in the Arabian Peninsula. The fundamental theological principle of the nation taught that there is no spiritual realm or afterlife and that the material universe is all that exists. However, as divine beings, humans could develop parapsychological powers such as telepathy, and each has different abilities and degrees of power. Drawing on its connection to Dianetics, the nation proclaims God is man and man is God, and man is a collective nation of gods. And furthermore, knowledge of self is key for mankind to realize its inner divinity. The cosmogony of the religion dictates that long ago, a scientist named Yakub, known as Big Head due to his unusually large cranium, utilized genetic manipulation to create an artificial race that lacked divinity and was inherently violent. As such, they were cast out of paradise and forced to live barbaric lives in caves, eating raw meat. Moses taught them to wear clothes and tried to civilize them, but failed. However, they used their knowledge of tricks and lies to eventually achieve global dominance. Drawing upon the book of Revelation, the rise of evil has initiated a coming apocalypse. However, the nation teaches that a Messiah will soon arrive aboard the wheel, or mother plane, half a mile in diameter, which is the Merkaba described in the book of Ezekiel. The mother plane will then dispatch baby planes that will place bombs beneath Earth's surface, which will destroy the evil order and establish a new utopia. Furthermore, the ruling elites are aware of the coming apocalypse and have established space-based initiatives in a futile attempt to defend against the mother plane.
Everything that exists is due to a series of apocalypses, right? I mean, like,
yes,
the first apocalypse, according to the standard model, would have been the Big Bang or whatever.
Yeah,
right. Like,
that's right.
And then the formation of a star is a form of apocalypse.
Yeah.
And the explosion of those stars, which creates the planets and all that kind of stuff, is like,
yeah,
it's all, we just happen to be in a, there's always a coming apocalypse is the point.
That's right. So it should be emphasized that the theological principles of the Nation of Islam completely contrast with the doctrine of the traditional Islamic faith. And finally, there is the most infamous of all UFO cults. In 1974, Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite founded an organization under the name Human Individual Metamorphosis, or HIM, which would later become better known as Heaven's Gate. Nettles and Applewhite, who referred to themselves as T and Doe, taught the belief that their followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature and leaving their bodies. They would then ascend to heaven aboard flying saucers to escape the coming apocalypse. Following the death of Nettles from cancer in 1985, Applewhite was distraught and changed his view of the transformation process to that of the discarding of the containers or vehicles for their soul through death, after which they would be provided with next-level bodies. See, this is all this video game language. In October 1996, the group purchased an alien abduction insurance policy, which we have read on this show before. You remember that?
Yep. I should have made the reference to the episode.
And this would cover up to 50 members and pay out $1 million to each of their surviving families. With the approach of Hale-Bopp in March 1997, Applewhite recorded a message to the world claiming that a spaceship was trailing the comet, which would provide the only way to evacuate Earth and would represent the closure to Heaven's Gate. Between March 22 and March 26, 1997, 39 members of the group, including Applewhite, committed ritual mass suicide, all hauntingly dressed in matching purple jumpsuits and white Nike tennis shoes. Unlike the others discussed, Heaven's Gate was not founded on contact with non-human intelligence, but can be more accurately described as a cult of personality. But to find out what can happen when both of these criteria are met, we must go back to near the beginning of our story. In Brothers of the Serpent, episode 213, we discussed how Jack Parsons, the father of American rocketry, was largely erased from history due to his allegiance to Aleister Crowley and obsession with dark occult practices. Yet, ironically, individuals such as Christopher Knowles and former CIA intelligence officer John Ramirez have pointed out many of NASA and the NRO's not-so-subtle nods to their occult roots. Perhaps it should come as no surprise that when Jack Parsons, Ed Foreman, and Frank Molina started the rocket research group at Caltech under Professor Theodore von Karman, their first official hire was an aerodynamicist named Apollo Smith. At the end of the Second World War in Europe, Theodore von Karman served as an advisor to General Hap Arnold, helping to identify Nazi scientists for procurement during Operation Paperclip. Most notable of these was Werner von Braun, who, although was directly involved in the design, construction, and acquisition of slave labor for the production of Hitler's vengeance weapons, the V-1 and V-2 rockets, and he was also a personal friend of Parsons. Von Karman was certain that von Braun would be quite an asset to their rocket program. Ultimately, it was not just von Braun's war crimes in Germany and Parsons' extracurricular activities here on American soil that were swept under the rug, but also the accomplishment of Parsons' partner, Frank Molina. While the rocket research group was in its infancy, and spaceflight was still considered science fiction, Frank published a paper in the Journal of Aeronautical Sciences titled "The Problem of Escape from Earth by Rocket," which presented mathematical data in support of his concept for multi-stage rockets, which would be crucial for not only spaceflight, but the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles. After the ousting of Parsons and the acquisition of von Braun, Molina, who was the first director of JPL, carried on, and his Bumper Whack Corporal Rocket, that's a big acronym there,
No,
Bumper WAC.
I think WAC is an acronym, but I don't know what Bumper stands
Okay.
Roger.
This rocket set a world record altitude of 244 miles, and it was also the first man-made object to ever reach hypersonic velocity. However, rather than being revered in the media and used by Disney as the official face of the space age, as was von Braun, Molina was instead placed under investigation by the FBI and other intelligence agencies. The official story was the typical rhetoric of the period, suspicion of communist sympathies, which was apparently considered a greater crime than actual genocide. Molina later stated that if those who publicized such matters had not been asleep in our country, a reasonable claim could have been made that the Bumper Whack project opened up the space age well before the Sputnik. Be that as it may, Parsons was also under investigation at that time, ostensibly for entirely different reasons. Or were they? What is known is that Molina had previously met with fellow rocket pioneer Robert Goddard in Roswell, New Mexico. And once he found himself on the radar of intelligence agencies, he and his wife burned boxes of documents in their backyard shortly before government agents descended upon their home, confiscating several boxes of the remaining documents. Molina's passport was revoked, he was interrogated, and he remained under surveillance until he retired to become a painter. We also know that various intelligence agencies, as well as the Collins elite, were very concerned with the activities of these individuals and their connection to the UFO phenomenon, as referenced in a DIA document titled Parsons, von Karman, and Goddard, A Door Unlocked. We may never really know the nature of any potentially damning information that had been contained in those documents. So is the accusation here that they were burning documents proving that they were communists or something?
No,
That's what the FBI is thinking?
I don't see how they would have boxes upon boxes of communist propaganda in their home.
You got to hand it to those commies, man. They're sneaky. I'm quoting a movie.
Yeah.
Okay? So, this seemingly unending series of unlikely coincidences, it should come as little surprise that wrapped within this web of marginalized characters, we learn that Frank Molina's son Roger would go on to become an astrophysicist and marry Christine Maxwell, who is the sister of Ghislaine Maxwell, the infamous consort of Jerry Epstein. Jeffrey, with ties to a dark underworld within the upper echelons of socio-political power, and who described himself as a science philanthropist, investing in such things as the Human Genome Project and publicly stating his desire to seed the human race with his DNA. That is wild. A revolving door.
Oh, yeah.
As also discussed...
Watcher can't find any signs of an acronym for Bumper Whack.
Bumper Whack.
Okay. It's WAC.
Yeah.
Okay. As also discussed previously, before Jack Parsons met his mysterious demise, he was befriended by a flamboyant science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard. It wasn't long before this friendship led to the sex magic ritual known as the Babylon Working. Performed out in the Mojave Desert, this was an attempt to manifest Parsons' elemental, the daughter of the Whore of Babylon, who would give birth to a moon child, otherwise known as the Antichrist.
Totally failed.
This was an undertaking that even the wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley, considered a really bad idea. But it was too late. During the ritual, Parsons gazed into an empty black box for an hour where a sacred design would appear, and upon completion of the ritual, Parsons confidently declared, "It is done." This is very reminiscent of the story of Joseph Smith gazing into his hat, where a scroll would appear dictating the Book of Mormon. In a letter to Crowley recounting the event, Parsons wrote, "I have been in direct touch with one who is most holy and beautiful, mentioned in the Book of Law. I cannot write the name at present. I cannot tell you the depth of reality, the terror, and the beauty I have known. Now I am back in the world weak with reaction." Suggestive of an age-old rite of passage where the pupil becomes the master, Crowley responded, "You have me completely puzzled by your remarks about the elemental. I thought I had the most morbid imagination, as good as any man's, but it seems I have not. I cannot form the slightest idea who you can possibly mean." So what's Crowley saying there? He's basically like, I don't know who you're talking about. Whichever this one who is most holy and beautiful mentioned in the Book of the Law, I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Right. Parsons, they performed this ritual and he claims that he went somewhere, another realm, and saw this.
That's while he was gazing into the box. Okay. Mm-hmm. So upon arriving home, Parsons was met by a sultry 23-year-old redhead named Marjorie Cameron, who had just moved to Pasadena from Washington, D.C. and was looking for a place to stay. Apparently, she thought to herself, what better place than the sexual debauchery of the parsonage? Born in Iowa, Cameron enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1943 and soon found herself serving as a cartographer for the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon. As fate would have it, in 1945, her brother James was injured while serving in the war in the Pacific, and she elected to go AWOL to visit him back in Iowa. For this, she received a court-martial and was confined to barracks, that is, until she was inexplicably granted an honorable discharge and immediately traveled across the country from D.C. to Parsons' doorstep in Pasadena on January 18th of 1946. Perhaps this was simply because, as unlikely coincidences would dictate, her father and brothers were already working at JPL. Parsons and Cameron immediately began an affair, spending the entire first 2 weeks of their relationship locked in his bedroom. 9 months later, 4 days after finalizing the divorce from his wife, Helen, Parsons and Cameron were married. But unlike mainstream historians, let's not simply skip over an important event that occurred immediately following their initial rendezvous. The Ordo Templi Orientis archives contain details of an incident recounted by Cameron, which she alleges took place in late January, early February of 1946. While on the grounds of the parsonage, a strange feeling came over Cameron as if the whole world slowed to a stop. Her attention was drawn to an object in the sky as her body became frozen in place while her mind struggled to reconcile what she was observing. It moved like this. It moved from that part of the sky like this. I guess she's hand waving. Enough for me to see the glint of the sun upon it, and it was absolutely silent. She described the shape as smooth and round, rounder than anything she thought possible. It's a strange statement. Mm-hmm. She concluded that the object must have been a war engine, as described in Chapter 3 of the Book of the Law. Transcribed by Aleister Crowley from his guardian angel in 1904, the book states that Horus would usher in a new era through a bloody sacrifice, a great war that would bathe the world in blood. And for this to be accomplished, Ra-Hur-Kuit said, "I will give you a war engine. With it ye shall smite the peoples, and none shall stand before you." So this could be interpreted as suggesting a transfer of technology or forbidden knowledge from the gods to man. And it also sounds biblical. The holy hand grenade. Once the object departed, Cameron ran inside to drag Parsons outside to tell him what she had seen. She recounts that as he listened, his pupils darted about in a manner she came to associate with his precognitive abilities. As she described the object, he pulled out a yellow notepad and began drawing the shape, which was inexplicably 3D and beyond dimensions, this is what I connected to, like rounder than anything she thought possible. To me, that connected to like she's seeing something beyond 3 dimensions.
Yeah, she couldn't describe
It's
it.
round in another,
Yeah.
right on a different axis that you don't normally see. So it should be stressed that this event allegedly took place 16 months in advance of Kenneth Arnold's sighting over Mount Rainier, which ushered in the modern UFO era. Given her occult perspective in this regard, she later stated, "I didn't know what I was seeing. Since then, I have researched the Inquisition, and this was one of the most famous occurrences. It was cause for heresy to see these things in the sky. The ships in the sky came, they called them. They were the elements. They were here to restore paradise to Earth. UFOs are not high-tech. This is the restoration of the elemental powers that are available to the matriarchy."
Matriarchy.
Yes.
Feminine.
Parsons wrote a series of poems about Cameron where he described a hidden world beyond the view of normal mortals, a world of which intelligence agencies and the Collins elite were desperate to learn more about. So do you think he's believing that she's the Moonchild? Like he totally
think-
bought into this?
Yeah.
One
See,
thing
no,
that is never
yeah,
mentioned
he-
in here.
He believes she was going to give birth to the moon.
Oh, okay. Okay. So she's the whore.
She's the daughter of the whore of Babylon.
The daughter of the whore of Babylon that will give birth to the Moonchild.
Right.
Okay. Sorry. What were you
I
saying,
was just
Bill?
saying, one thing that's never mentioned in all of these stories is like, what drugs were they doing?
Yeah.
Parsons
Like,
was doing a
They're
lot.
doing a
They're
lot
doing,
of drugs.
yeah.
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 So, I mean, I don't know. It's believable
Yeah.
that they,
So was Crowley. Crowley was famous.
That
Crowley
they-
was,
Yeah.
they would have huge drug sex orgies.
yeah. So, yeah, sure, they can believe all this stuff, right? Like, I don't know. They're tripping balls.
Yes.
and then taking it literally or something.
Yeah. Yep. So, after the initial visit by the FBI to their home, Cameron felt that she was in danger and asked Parsons for some form of protection. So he painstakingly fashioned for her a crystal-encrusted amulet that housed a secret compartment containing a small amber pill that was lethal when ingested. This served as 2 forms of protection in one exquisitely crafted piece. However, his effort was for naught. The piece was ultimately confiscated in a raid of his home shortly after his death on June 17th in 1952. Within less than a month, UFOs would defiantly descend upon Washington, D.C., which for Cameron was a clear response to what she believed was Parsons' murder. Cameron continued to practice occult magic, gathering followers devoted to Horus, who she referred to as the Children. In 1953, she began attempting contact with her holy guardian angel, and she wrote, "For some months now, I have been aware of the heightening intensity of what I call a third beam of hearing. I can describe it as the sound of a radio beam that one picks up on shortwave. It is independent of my normal hearing. If I close my eyes, it is not affected in any way. There are moments when it is so intense that I can actually tune it in by turning my body. It seems to be heightened in power by the presence of some other humans. I have the feeling that there is someone on the other end, or let me say that I have the feeling that the beam transcends time and space, and that I am hearing the sound of my transmitter echoed in incredible places." Cameron soon began speaking of apocalyptic visions of Earth's destruction and how her followers would be rescued by flying saucers. But the apocalypse did not come, and all was not lost. Fortuitously, while serving in the U.S. Navy, Cameron worked as a wardrobe supervisor for propaganda films, where she had the opportunity to mingle with Hollywood stars. Drawing upon this experience, she soon made her way into films and exhibitions dedicated to her paintings. She found herself in avant-garde art and poetry circles, where she became friends with UFO contactee George Van Tassel, and was introduced to Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, who was a great admirer of Cameron. Throughout her life, Marjorie Cameron remained devoted to Crowley's thelemic ideas. She died of lung cancer on July 24th, 1995, at the age of 73, and received her last rites by the Ordo Templi Orientis. Her body was cremated, and befittingly, her ashes were spread in the Mojave Desert, where 50 years earlier, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard had performed the Babylon working to achieve her manifestation.
So she never had a child?
She never give
never
birth
had
to
a
a moon
child,
child?
that
But
we know
You
of?
see this tangled web of
Yeah.
personalities.
Yeah, and it's mixed up with the space project, the whole space program and the government and paperclip and just
It was just in a period where, like, I think they were doing these new drugs, right? These hallucinogens, and it was like, this is giving you visions of an alternate universe, or like a deeper vision into the actual universe we live in. And they just, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's one layer of this, but there's another underlying layer that you got to look at. The fact that she goes AWOL and is court-martialed, and all of a sudden she's discharged
and
with
just
full
basically
honor,
sent
and
to
shows
Parsons'
up
place.
Parsons' doorstep, straight from Washington, D.C.
Right.
And it just so happened that her father and brother were already working for Parsons.
So like they sent her in as a honeypot or something.
yeah.
And
She was like a
I
guided
said,
missile
she
sent into
worked-
Parsons' life.
She worked in propaganda films
Yeah.
before, and she got into Hollywood like that quick.
Mm-hmm.
And look at who she's rubbing elbows with. And Anton LaVey, I don't want to get into this too much, but he was in the military.
Anton
and,
LaVey. Yeah.
And there's lots of spooky stuff related to that. That goes deeper than anything we.
But this is a time period, right, when the CIA or government organizations were experimenting with these hallucinogenic drugs, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
So they're doing this to see, like, well, I don't know why they're doing it, but they could be doing it to see if a number of things, like, does this actually give you visions into an alternate dimension that's affecting our reality?
Well,
And
if
so
you
then they
believe-
facilitate these people that are like,
If you believe what the Collins elite said, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they were investigating. I think that's exactly why they were investigating Molina.
which could be the same reason why Manson and his followers and stuff were constantly being released from prison
Okay.
and
right.
sent back to keep doing stuff.
Okay, so
you know.
you're making all these mental connections, right? There's this other layer that I keep, these layers. Right? These are multiple layers. This next part is very critical to that other layer.
Okay. So many questions remain surrounding Parsons' life and death. Although Marjorie Cameron was convinced of his murder, his friend Frank Molina voiced a different concern, stating, "If you are looking for a conspiracy, it's not his death. It's why he's been wiped from history." But such efforts to obscure both Molina and Parsons' lives pale in comparison to those surrounding that of his former partner, L. Ron Hubbard. The following may be found in the public domain and draws heavily from the book A Piece of Blue Sky, Scientology, Dianetics, and L. Ron Hubbard Exposed by author John Attack.
Yes.
It's an acronym, which has been reviewed by the academic publication Marburg Journal of Religion, which refers to it as the most thorough general history of Hubbard and Scientology. The information we will be discussing is not intended as an indictment of the religion or its followers, but rather a review of the underpinnings of Hubbard's closely held beliefs and potential discoveries. Already well established as a prolific writer of pulp fiction, in 1938, Lafayette Ronald Hubbard claimed to have achieved his first philosophical breakthrough, the discovery that the primary law of all existence is survival. He wrote about this insight in a 300-plus page unpublished manuscript initially titled The One Command, but changed to Excalibur, which elucidated the basis for what would later become Dianetics and Scientology. Hubbard told his literary agent, Forrest J. Ackerman, that this epiphany occurred when his heart stopped for 6 minutes while undergoing a dental procedure under anesthesia. While in the midst of this near-death experience, he went out of body and found himself at a great ornate gate. On the other side of this gate, spread out like an intellectual smorgasbord, was the sum total of human knowledge. Hubbard joined the U.S. Navy in 1941. Lots of Navy people. And there are conflicting accounts. You know, Heinlein was also in the Navy.
They were friends.
Yeah. And
that book, what is the book about the guy from Mars that he wrote? A Stranger in a Strange Land. That was like a huge motivating book for Manson.
Yeah. It caused lots of weird stuff to happen. Yeah. So, Hubbard joined the Navy in 1941, and there are conflicting accounts regarding his exploits while serving, but what is verifiably documented is that he was admitted into Oak Knoll Naval Hospital in April of 1945. While on convalescence leave, publisher Lou Goldstone introduced Hubbard to Jack Parsons, who was immediately impressed by his self-professed worldly knowledge. 2 days after Hubbard was released from the hospital on December 4th, 1945, he moved into the parsonage. As Edward Kelly did for John Dee, Hubbard soon began serving as a scryer for Parsons, and we have already discussed some of their workings ad nauseum. However, there is other relevant information regarding what occurred near the culmination of their relationship and following which we have yet to touch upon. In January of 1946, Parsons performed the 8th degree of the OTO ritual with Hubbard's assistance. The ritual, titled Concerning the Secret Marriages of Gods with Men, took place over 12 consecutive nights, comprising a series of 11 invocations, including one named the Conjuration of Air. Shortly after its conclusion, Parsons stated, "Ron called me, and we observed a brownish-yellow light about 7 feet high in the kitchen." Parsons ran to his bedroom and grabbed a sword off the wall, and then ran back to the kitchen to perform a banishing ritual. While drawing pentagrams in the air with his sword, Parsons followed the orb into the library where it diminished until it vanished completely, leaving Hubbard's right arm paralyzed for the rest of the night. This incident is very reminiscent of the illustration on the cover of the translation of the Book of Abramelin from 1458, which discusses Kabbalistic secrets for the acquisition of knowledge and depicts the magician with what appears to be a large yellow sphere or orb floating in the room before him. Soon after the orb encounter, Parsons experienced another paranormal phantasm, this time emanating with a buzzing metallic voice. Ultimately, Hubbard sailed off the coast of Miami with Parsons' yacht, $20,000 of his savings, and more upsettingly to Parsons, his mistress/sister-in-law, Betty Northrup. Parsons flew to Florida in pursuit of them, and while in his hotel room, he received word that they were seen sailing out of the harbor. So Parsons quickly drew a circle on the floor and stepped into it and began a full invocation to Bart Zabel, the spirit of Mars, requesting his intervention in the matter. Coincidentally, at that moment, a squall ripped the sails off the yacht, which forced the two lovers back to shore, where Parsons awaited them. Although their reasonably well-known friendship had come to a bitter end, what is far lesser known is that Hubbard and Northrup then moved to Hollywood, where Hubbard continued his long-standing pursuit of dark occult magic. So what's the implication here? That Parsons successfully invocated a spell that tore the sails off the yacht to stop them from leaving with his stuff?
He claimed to have had the ability to manipulate weather.
That's great.
But maybe he's not the only person that's made that claim.
Yeah.
I have the vision of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, with the ball in the house. Like, look what God did to us, man. God didn't do that. You're a cocaine addict.
Yes, right. The June 1983 issue of Penthouse magazine featured an interview with Hubbard's eldest son, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., conducted by a contributing editor, Alan something.
Sonnenschein.
Sonnenschein. Contained within the interview are startling allegations. Despite their inflammatory nature, many of Hubbard Jr.'s claims appear to have been corroborated in documents entered as evidence in lawsuits filed either by the church or by former members. In the Penthouse interview, Sonnenschein pressed Hubbard Jr. with questions regarding his father's personal beliefs, and his response was unequivocal. The Antichrist, Aleister Crowley, thought of himself as such, and when Crowley died in 1947, my father then decided that he should wear the cloak of the beast and become the most powerful being in the universe. Also, you've got to realize that my father did not worship Satan. He thought he was Satan. He was one with Satan. He had a direct pipeline of communication and power with him.
This is the same thing with Charles Manson.
Yeah. But this was not an isolated reference to Hubbard's affinity for Crowley. In the book A Piece of Blue Sky, author Attack quotes a Philadelphia doctorate course lecture given by Hubbard in 1952, where he stated, "The magic cults of the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries in the Middle East were fascinating. The only work that has anything to do with them is a trifle wild in spots, but it's fascinating work, written by Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend." Additional insight is provided in the Penthouse interview, which suggests that Hubbard Sr. had a profound interest in the occult long before meeting Parsons. In fact, Hubbard joined the Ancient and Mystic Order of the Rosy Cross in 1940. That would be the Rosicrucians.
Yep.
This is a fraternal order dedicated to the study of the elusive mysteries of life and the universe. It seems that Hubbard and Parsons' shared objectives would explain their immediate attraction. Hubbard Jr. elaborates. My father's involvement goes back to when he was 16, living in Washington, D.C. He got hold of the book by Aleister Crowley called The Book of the Law. He was very interested in several things that were the creation of what some people call the moon child. It was basically an attempt to create an immaculate conception, except by Satan rather than by God. Another important idea was the creation of what they call embryo implants, of getting a satanic or demonic spirit to inhabit the body of a fetus. Records indicate that Hubbard's teenage aspirations were acted upon nearly 2 decades later. In February of 1946, shortly after Marjorie Cameron's arrival on the scene, she, Parsons, and Hubbard performed Crowley's 9th degree ritual for the creation of a homunculus, which Crowley described as a living being in form resembling man and possessing those qualities of man which distinguish him from beasts, namely intellect and power of speech, but neither begotten and born in the manner of human generation, nor inhabited by a human soul. So please refer back to Brothers of the Serpent episode 213 to fully grasp the unlikely coincidence of how both Hubbard and Parsons' independent interests in creating a homunculus, aka a soulless artificial man, mirrors that of the creation of a golem, aka a soulless artificial man, by the Maharal of Prague, a direct antecedent of Theodore von Karman, the director of Parsons' rocket program and a partner in the Aerojet Corporation. Yeah, those are crazy connections there. Yeah. Arguably, the most revelatory allegation included in the 1983 Penthouse interview came when Hubbard Jr. was questioned about the basis for his father's techniques, and he responded, "The basic rationale is that there are some powers in this universe that are pretty strong. As an example, Hitler was involved in the same black magic and the same occult practices that my father was. The identical ones, which, as I have said, stem clear back to before Egyptian times. It is a very secret thing, very powerful and very workable and very dangerous. Brainwashing is nothing compared to it. The proper term would be soul cracking. It's like cracking open the soul, which then opens various doors to the power that exists, the satanic and demonic powers. Simply put, it's like a tunnel or an avenue or a doorway. Pulling that power into yourself through another person, and using women especially, is incredibly insidious. It makes Dr. Fu Manchu look like a kindergarten student. It is the ultimate vampirism, the ultimate mindfuck. Instead of going for blood, you're going for their soul. and you take drugs in order to reach that state where you can, quite literally, like a psychic hammer, break their soul and pull the power through. He designed his Scientology operating thetan techniques to do the same thing. Thetan? Thetan? This statement is completely in accord with his father's assertion that his technique was discovered, not invented, what he described as the science of knowing how to know.
Okay, who's the father again?
L. Ron Hubbard.
Okay.
So what we're hearing is
From,
Hubbard's son
yeah.
saying his dad was into, like,
Is he proud of this? Or
cracking.
is
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
no. This was an interview, and he's saying is that this was some ancient technique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this brings us to a key element of our story. For this, we must conceptualize Hubbard's definition of a thetan. In A Piece of Blue Sky, the book's author provides us with the following definition based on recordings of Hubbard's Philadelphia doctorate course of 1952. So yeah, we're just go along here. We've only got a couple pages left.
Yeah.
The thetan is the self, the I, that which is aware of being aware in man. Since its entry into the physical universe trillions of years ago, the thetan, originally all-knowing, has declined through a dwindling spiral of introversion into matter, energy, space, and time. The thetan can allegedly exteriorize from its physical body, and Hubbard gave auditing techniques which he claimed would achieve this result. The thetan is immortal and capable of all sorts of remarkable feats. Scientologists call these operating thetan, or OT, abilities. They include telekinesis, levitation, telepathy, recall of previous lives, exterior perception or remote viewing, disembodied movement to any desired location, and the power to will events to occur, to transform, create, or destroy matter, energy, space, and time. Unfortunately, theta beings have to share human bodies with other lesser spirits or entities, originally called theta bodies.
In that paragraph right there, there are multiple important references.
Yeah, I got
They'll have to go back and re-listen. Listeners will have to go back and re-listen. But I don't want to necessarily point them out. But
Why
there's
not?
several key points there. Some will be points we'll be addressing later.
Just point 'em
and
out.
Some we've already discussed.
Don't be an asshole, Marty. Point them out. Come on.
Well, right off the bat, the one that he's saying that they have to share bodies with theta beings.
Mm-hmm.
The
Who are
theta beings have to,
lesser
yeah, the
spirits.
theta beings have to share human bodies with lesser spirits.
Right.
Yeah.
Remember in Ossipee,
Yeah.
he said that the evil spirits, I don't remember what name he refers to them as, but that they adhered to humans.
Yeah. That's right. And then this is also implying that the remote viewing is actually coming from some other entity.
Correct.
It's
Along
another
with
way
all
of
of it.
saying possession.
Yes.
Right?
They're talking about
possessed.
possession. Yeah. So this description bears a striking resemblance to the alleged abilities of John Newbrough, the founder of OSPI, which was discussed earlier. Note that as early as 1882 and again 70 years later in 1952, Newbrough and Hubbard were already referencing remote viewing and telekinesis techniques that would become subjects of government-funded scientific research. In fact, in 1952, Hubbard published a book titled What to Audit, in which he warned that the Earth was on the verge of a psychic war. So now we reach what is beyond doubt the most controversial of all Hubbard's writings, which he instructed were only to be disclosed 2 years after his death to those who achieved the level of OT 8,
Fail.
the highest order within the Church of Scientology. And yes, there was a fail because these documents are ironically known as the Truth Revealed. And there is a long, convoluted backstory to these documents, but the short story is the church filed federal lawsuits against several individuals for copyright infringement after the documents were posted on the internet. One of these individuals was a former church member named Stephen Fishman, who submitted the documents known as the Fishman Affidavit into court evidence in 1993. This placed the church in the unenviable position of either pursuing the lawsuit and thereby validating the authenticity of the documents, or dropping the suit and claiming the documents were forgeries, and they opted for the latter. Regrettably for them, many former members ultimately vouched for their authenticity anyway, and these documents also corroborate the allegations made by Hubbard Jr. in his penthouse interview a decade earlier. In summary, what is contained in these documents is Hubbard's claim that there is some truth in the Book of Revelations. As such, it is his destiny to fulfill the biblical prophecy and assume the role of Lightbringer, or Lucifer the Antichrist, in an attempt to fend off the second coming, which would initiate a series of cataclysmic events. In his interpretation, Christ is associated with the Markab Confederacy, an evil alien race who once ruled Earth and placed mankind on this prison planet. He goes on to defame Jesus and warns of interdimensional beings who walk among us with genetically modified bodies who operate under the Markabian influence. Maybe these are angels.
Notice Markabian sounds very similar to the Markaba.
Yep.
Which is
the Merkaba.
Right. The crafts described, or the object described by Ezekiel.
Yep. In 1984, the Church of Scientology filed another lawsuit for violation of confidentiality against former church member Gerald Armstrong, who had been provided access to a vast number of Hubbard's writings for a biography project. Resulting from this action, certain sections were read into the court record against strong objections by the church's attorneys, but subsequently were acknowledged as genuine. A portion of the recorded documents was a voluminous collection of handwritten pages containing Hubbard's deepest and most private thoughts titled Affirmations. Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue's attorney, claimed that these were far and away the most private and personal documents that I have ever read by anybody. Within these documents, Hubbard describes his relationship with his guardian angel, who he refers to as the Empress, who appears to him as a beautiful woman dressed in a white gown with golden slippers. He states that the Empress guides and protects him, even having saved his life at several junctures throughout his lifetime. The author Arthur Burks, who read the original manuscript of Hubbard's Excalibur in 1938, noted that even before the war, Hubbard spoke of his guardian angel as a beautiful, smiling woman who protected him. In Affirmations, Hubbard further states that he speaks to the Empress and audibly hears her voice. Oh, yes, Kyle's pointing out the tarot card, the Empress.
In a white gown.
In a white gown. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So he audibly hears her voice above all others. And Hubbard goes on to explain his belief that our guardian angels do not control us, but rather advise us. And anyone can receive communications from their guardian angel through automatic writing. Furthermore, as with Nubro's Oaspi and Crowley's The Book of the Law, both dictated by their guardian angels, Hubbard alleged that his book Dianetics was written via automatic writing as dictated by the Empress. So, given all the preceding information, of further importance is a related document read into the court record in the Armstrong case titled Blood Ritual. This document is dedicated to a principal Egyptian deity referred to as the Goddess of Love, but also known as the Destroyer of Man. This was Hubbard's Empress, the deity read into the official court record, referenced by Burke and known to Crowley and Parsons as Babylon, a name previously revealed by Hubbard's son as the true identity of the Empress and also corroborated in the blood ritual document. The beautiful, smiling woman in a white gown was known to Hubbard as none other than the goddess Hathor. Oh, we visited her temple in Egypt.
Yep.
All of her faces have been destroyed.
Yeah, almost.
She made somebody mad in Egypt. Yeah. Regular listeners to the UFO series and those familiar with the Chris Bledsoe case should immediately recognize the enormous potential implications. Is this simply a coincidence, or are we beginning to identify a pattern? Perhaps we shall be able to expand upon this more as we proceed through the UFO series. Irrespective of one's position on Hubbard's character, buried deep beneath the pomp and circumstance surrounding him appears to be a kernel of what perhaps may have been some form of ancient knowledge inadvertently stumbled upon or acquired through cohorts. In this regard, once again, unlikely coincidences presents us with the December 1949 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine, which, besides including the first ever mention of Dianetics in print, includes a fictional story written by L. Ron Hubbard titled A Can of Vacuum, The story provides a fictional account of an unschooled practical joker who makes remarkable scientific discoveries. And as a twofer, the cover appears to depict a man staring astonishingly at a bright yellow orb. So
Patterns.
the implication there being that the Empress and maybe even some of the BVM sightings, the Virgin Mary stuff.
Right, which we covered in Deconstructing Demons.
Yeah, all of this is like Hathor is just a very old name for her, but
Well, in the Marian apparitions, she goes by many different names.
yeah, she's like the love and destruction. It's so strange.
Correct.
Hathor.
That's
Yeah.
sort of right.
She's
exactly.
the goddess of love, but also the destroyer of
Different
man.
name.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
the description.
Isn't Kali like that too? The Hindu goddess, like once she begins, she's like the goddess of love and nature, but once she begins to dance, like everything gets
there's
destroyed.
This duality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, one final quote here from Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. When a man feels that he has a divine mission, say to lift up, or to save, or to liberate mankind, when a man feels the divine spark in his heart and believes that he is the mouthpiece of supernatural imperatives, when such a mission inflames him, it is only natural that he should stand beyond all merely reasonable standards of judgment. He feels that he is himself sanctified by this mission, that he is himself a type of a higher order.
Yep. Don't think you're saving the
Never,
world.
yes. The people who think they're saving the world are the most dangerous. That's totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of that stuff just sounds to me like, I guess, you take all this ancient mythology and then you twist it into the newly advanced space age, and they're like, they're doing drugs and they're kind of like, hey, we're going to space and look at all these ancient myths and blah, 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 and they're all tripping balls and they're coming up with some crazy shit. That's what it sounds like to me. Like all this stuff.
Yeah.
What I kind of draw from it,
they're at
possibly, is the way it seems to me is it's like the stories are consistent in some ways and inconsistent in others, but it almost appears to me as though it's like a story that someone didn't fully understand. So it's like kind of like the telephone game. They're giving their interpretation of the story, and they get some of the details right and some of the details wrong, or they, elaborate in certain areas, but the underlying story is consistent. It's these are the intermediaries between the truly divine and us. But again,
yeah, I'm not saying that some of the encounters and experiences aren't genuine. I'm talking about the way these people, some of these characters, analyze this stuff or interpret it. The way they interpret it is like a combination of this sort of convoluted ancient mythology combined with the fact that the human race was entering the space age. It's like that right along that time there was, but in society at the time too, there was also like lots of other type of strange revolutions, pop culture, hallucinogenic drugs, just a lot of that stuff. It's like, a lot of these Eastern religions and stuff started becoming more prevalent, and they contain, because we've looked into all this, we like to look at the connections between all these different religious texts, right? These ancient texts and the stories that they're telling in the mythology. My interpretation of it is that they are like, it's not mine, but, people that I follow, like Graham Hancock's interpretation of it, that there may have been a precursor civilization that that seeded all of these ancient myths. So it's like, you can look at it like, how did all these different civilizations come up with this same story? That's a crazy coincidence. Maybe aliens came down to all of them and gave them a similar story, right? But you don't need that explanation if you look at a precursor civilization.
Well, one of the things with this also is that I looked at it like, let's say these people are just schizophrenic, right? This is a delusion. But what is in our core that would bring out a similar delusion so consistently through these people? Because I think in most of these cases, it's very unlikely that they were aware of each other, that they were just restating the same story they had heard before. Like, for example, in Newborough's case, where he's writing about these evil spirits that adhere to mankind, that sounds almost identical to Enoch talking about the evil spirits. But this was written before, I believe this was written before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, so that story wasn't known yet. Coincidence? Maybe he's a lucky guess. I don't know, but
Yeah, and another interpretation is that one of the reasons maybe why there are such similar stories across all these ages is because stuff like this has been happening to people throughout time. It doesn't have to be aliens, but people have been getting these same messages from whatever this is.
right. I watched this documentary.
So the Egyptians call her Hathor, and the Catholics think it's the Virgin Mary, but it's the same manifestation.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it may not even be the same. It may not even be an entity.
Right, because like again, we were talking about this, the skirt perspective of this is that, this is some type of a delusion, and that we need, somehow there's something in our psyche that we need this. And I saw in one of these documentaries, they conducted an experiment. This psychologist goes to a classroom with these children, young children, and he sets up a game where they have to stand behind a line and they have to throw a Velcro ball at a target, but they have to throw it over their shoulder behind them, so they can't really see the target when they're throwing the ball. So he says, okay, this is the game, and whoever gets the highest score wins a prize. And then he takes them out of the room, and they go into the room by themselves, one by one, to do this. So they're in the room alone. And of course, there's a hidden camera in there. And
so how many
every
of them are gonna
kid,
cheat?
as soon as they realize they're in there alone, goes and sticks the ball to the target. Right? So they run through this test, and now he comes in again. Now they conduct the test a second time with a different set of kids. And they tell the kids, I have a friend that's, I don't remember what they call it, the princess or something or other. And she has really unique abilities. She can make herself invisible. And they had a chair sitting next to the target. And he goes, she's sitting in this chair right now. And so then he goes, but we're going to play a game.
Yeah.
And so they do the same thing. And now the kids, believing that there's somebody sitting in that chair, don't cheat. They throw the ball. So they're using this to suggest, we build these things in our mind. Society has created this delusion to keep ourselves from doing bad things, or as though. But to me, that's like, it just because it works out that way, or just because somebody might act differently doesn't mean you're going to create a belief system.
Yeah, the psychologist had to tell them. The kids didn't come up with the idea that they were being watched.
Right, but the suggestion is that over time we created this.
Right, but he's basically
Guardrail.
proving that an outside source needs to show up and tell you that something's watching you. Right. Otherwise, they're going to cheat.
Right. Correlation is not causation. Right.
I'm not sure that, these people that, like, let's say they're having all these experiences and then they start naming the entity Hathor.
Right.
Did they do that before they ever heard of Hathor? Before they knew anything about Egyptian mythology and history? No, I highly doubt that. Like, they were already looking into all that stuff when they came up with this story, which is a conglomeration of a bunch of weird stuff that they had already been interested in, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It's like they're what would the name of the being been had they not known anything about ancient Egypt?
Yeah, he just called her the Empress, but that's also a tarot card. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like there's like, it's all this new agey stuff, which is looking into these ancient traditions and creating new analogies or interpretations of all these stories. And their interpretations are all in the same vein, right? Like, oh, we have these higher beings, and like we're gonna bring about the something or other because of it's apocalyptic. Well, apocalypse is in these ancient stories because perhaps they actually witnessed one. So it's like, yeah, it's coming again, which
I've heard, which we discussed her before.
And a couple of guys going out into the desert and doing a bunch of drugs and doing a bunch of whatever, drawing pentagrams in the sand and, saying strange things is not going to bring about the next apocalypse.
I believe it
in
was
my opinion.
In Deconstructing Demons, I believe we discussed theory forwarded by Gigi Young. And she has offered an opinion on why that is, why we get these like Egyptian deity names that come up often in these type of encounters. And she believes that whatever the intelligence is behind this, whether it's aliens or spirits or whatever it is, that they appropriate these things that are already recognized as like credentials, like you already know who I am type thing. Like, don't question my.
Yeah,
it's like the alien version of boomers, right? They're like, yeah, I'm Hathor. Like, that's nobody knows that name for like the last 4,000 years, man.
Or is it like people voting? They vote for the name they've heard before when they look at that sheet of paper and they have no idea,
And like you pointed out, they a lot of times they start out as like, I'm your grandfather, and then later it's like, oh, I'm actually Horus, or whatever.
Right. That's the thing. Is it's just it's circular. Is it an alien intelligence presenting itself as a spiritual, coming from the spiritual realm, or is it the spiritual realm presenting itself as aliens? Because the motif has changed over time.
Yeah.
The alien representation is rather new. If we're saying that this has been going on for millennia,
right? It's
that has only been occurring for the past,
the gambit of gods and aliens.
Yeah, right. But Kyle was pointing out earlier, it's like at first it's the kingdom of heaven, but then it's like now it's like the solar system parliament or whatever. It's just, like they've been claiming to be this for a long time. They're just using whatever the modern
iteration of that thing is.
Of it is. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about in the break.
Next thing you know, we're going to be contacted by the president of creation.
Right. The undersecretary.
That's right. The deputy assistant to the undersecretary of the president of creation. Promises that a flying saucer is going to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that perhaps the reason why these government entities are so deeply involved in some of these crazy stories of this sort of occult stuff is maybe that, it is of national security interest that some of these belief systems might get going and get momentum and cause an actual revolution. Because if you look through history, that has happened a lot. Religious revolutions or belief system revolutions. I mean, that's what it's all about. So it's kind of like if they start noticing, hey, there's some guy or some group of people that's getting like a whole bunch of followers and doing stuff. Maybe they infiltrate that little group and push it and try to give it more legitimacy to see, like, is it going to catch on?
Well,
and if it does, then they have a plan of like how to create all this taint it with all this disinformation and then basically destroy it.
Yeah,
have it destroy itself.
They want to
from
contain
within.
it. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Now we're going to Bramley type.
I'm talking about the government. I'm just, the CIA is like, yeah, well, okay, there's some crazies over here doing stuff, and well, maybe they're not crazies,
right? But the idea of the creation of subversive groups. The thing is that it would appear that the pattern of the phenomenon is to constantly be creating these groups.
Yeah, Valet pointed this out as well.
So
that there's a constant creation of these cults.
I mean, just look at how many did we name. I mean, we probably named at least a dozen in this episode.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we know of. I guarantee you there's been many we'd never got, they never told anybody, or no movement was created behind.
Right, and they're all drawing on ancient texts and coming up with like some random interpretation of ancient texts. And the modern big religions of the world are drawing upon their interpretations of ancient texts.
Yeah.
So yes, but that's
because those religions were created the same way as the stuff we're talking about.
They didn't create the myths, though. That avenue of creating a movement is a very popular thing for a very long time and creates some extremely powerful groups of people that last thousands of years.
Yeah.
So it is the interest of the government to keep an eye on those things popping up. So are we witnessing through all of your research and all this, like the things that look like crazy coincidental things that why the government's involved in all this? Or is this the government's like, yeah, we're going to watch this because, this is how gigantic movements are caused that take over the world.
They are involved, and that'll be the subject of the next episode.
That's my point. It makes sense that they would want to watch and take part in and control and contain these types of movements.
Yeah, but that says nothing about the source of the movements. Whether the government is looking into it or not, it could, like, they would be looking into it because they would be dangerous, whether it's just people being crazy and joining a cult, or whether there is some kind of weird extraterrestrial or spiritual connection.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the government's intervention is what makes them turn out to be so crazy. And you know what I'm saying? A lot of times, right?
As I said outside, and I've made reference to this in the Discord before without really clarifying what I meant, but the idea, and again, we're taking for granted that there have been crashes and recovered materials that we interpret or could be interpreted as gifts, right? For the advancement of technology. And as I kind of have, pointed out, we tend to believe that those technologies that might be gleaned are all aerospace related. And I believe that there may be a lot more being learned than that. Maybe some of this technology being derived is more related to the way humans work than necessary technology. Maybe a better understanding of how our minds work and how that can be manipulated. That's another underlying layer in this episode that will lead into the next.
Yeah, basically, if there is gifting of technology, who knows what they're getting from it? It doesn't just have to be aerospace stuff.
Right, because like, for example, Hubbard, I changed, in doing this research, and I read, a dozen books on Scientology and all, and in doing this research, my opinion of Hubbard changed in one sense, in that I initially thought that he was kind of just a con man, and that he was associating himself with Parsons.
You became
because-
convinced he was having a real encounter.
Right. I thought he was just trying to see what he could get out of Parsons. You
Yeah.
know, there's a guy with money. I'm going to, befriend him and see what I can get. But
Yeah.
now I come to find out, no, he already held these beliefs way before he met Parsons.
Yeah.
And continued in after Parsons' death. So these were his core beliefs,
Yeah.
delusional or not. And I believe that, and this will be a subject for the future, but there were things that he may have learned or stumbled upon by accident that had significant impact on future events.
Yeah, well, it's no doubt that Scientology has a lot of powerful people in it, but so does Masonry. So, and Crowley was very influential as well, and he was a weird guy,
Right.
and also probably involved in intelligence agencies and spying and stuff. Like, it's,
And note that Hubbard Jr. said that this was also the same thing that Hitler was researching.
Yeah.
It's the old adage, he who controls the past controls the future. Right? If you create a new interpretation of the past that catches on, and that's what people take to be the truth, then
you're
that
running the show.
That controls the future.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
actually
it's like,
what
this is the game.
Ospey did. He wrote, it's a book on the past
Yeah.
and the future.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Literally
all
wrote
this-
the book on the past.
all these weird little cults that pop up have this in their own little special interpretation of the past. And people, and it's always connected to the ancient texts, and it's this interpretation of how the ancient texts.
So is that what we're doing on this podcast?
Oh, shit.
Is the Watcher still with us? I know he had a...
Hey, it's a certificate of ignorance over here.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, I have my interpretation of the past,
Yeah.
but I'm not trying to force that on people or like create some like, here's how you have to interpret it.
Right.
I don't know.
And we don't say we're going to be saved by flying saucers from the end of the world either, which is like almost all of these that we went through tonight. That's the end. Like, there's going to be
That's what I'm saying.
apocalypse.
There's coercion involved in these ones that are dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. That's like this is the way you have to act and behave.
Yeah.
Right. People that are willing
To
to
the point
die
where
for
they'll
their
starve
beliefs.
to death.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's and disregarding these little ones that are recent, you look at the large ones that are very ancient that are
Yeah.
still being
Yep.
practiced and followed. It's an interpretation of the past.
Yeah. All right.
I don't know.
More to come.
We still don't know what's going on.
No idea what's going on. but something about that era, just like, yeah, fear and loathing.
There you go. That's right. You're a cocaine addict. That's it. All right. Couple of announcements here. We've got the Snake Bros meetup coming up. It is May 13th through the 15th. It's going to be on the Nueces River.
In Campwood, Texas.
Campwood, Texas. The name of the place is Arrowhead on the Nueces, right? That's the venue. Or Arrowhead Lodge. So we were thinking that people would just be able to rent beds, but basically how it's happening now is people are working it out between themselves in the Discord chat in the meetups channel. So if you're interested in going, you can check our website. We've got a new section there called Meetups and Events, and you can get information on the lodge and how to contact them. But you can also email us, either me at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com or Laura. I've put her Holocene email on there. So you can email one of us if you're interested in going, and we can figure out where to put you. But it's best if you get in the Discord and talk with everybody else who's going, because they're already all working it out between themselves. So,
Yeah, so basically we reserved all the cabins, but they need to be, if they're going to be filled up, they need to be paid for. So some people have paid for some cabins, and there's extra beds in their cabins that they're saying if you want
yeah.
to go, you can hit them up to get
And
that
split
extra
the
bed.
cost, yeah.
So there's a few of those spots. There's a small cabin still available with 2 queen beds, and then there's at least at the time of this recording. And then there's a large, like the guest house, which is the largest of the lodges on site, that hasn't been, nobody's in there yet. So we'll just see.
Yeah.
As it fills up, we might start filling that one up too. So
And the guest house has like 3 separate rooms with beds, queen beds in it or something like that.
Something like that.
And then there's like other, there's a futon and a bunk bed or something like that. But we can work all that out if you guys want to email us about it. But the best way might be to just get in the Discord and discuss this with other people who are going, because they're already renting cabins or cottages and stuff. So, but either way, we'll all work it out. We'll figure it out when we get there, and we'll make sure everybody has a place. And of course, there's also camping. But of course, the camping, there's no facilities for camping, but that's not a big problem. We'll just share the facilities that we have inside the buildings.
Yeah.
So if you want to camp
and stuff.
if you want to camp, you can show up with your tent, and we'll make sure that you get to use bathroom and take showers and whatever you need.
And so hopefully we'll have just enough rain to where the river will be up. It won't be too rainy while we're there, and also it won't be too dry so that we can have fires. So we're hoping for the best weather situation, obviously.
Yeah.
But in either case, if the river's down, there's still a spring-fed swimming hole right there at the site. So we'll have that even if but the plan basically is to go kayaking down the canyons in the Nueces for, one trip each day, and then just hang out at the site and barbecue and jam out and yuck it up and drink beers and talk pyramids. That's right. So yeah, check that out, and we hope you go.
Also, there is a new Telegram group that was created specifically for sending messages to the podcast, audio messages. So there are links to that in the Discord chat. I can also put them in the show notes and maybe on the website. I'll figure that out. There's also a phone number. If you want to send a voicemail to the podcast, which we can hear and possibly play it on the show, just keep in mind that any message you send in the Telegram or to the voicemail may get played on the podcast. That's what it's for. The phone number is 1-816-459-0272, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
It ends in 72.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to Saucy Jefferman,
Thank you, buddy.
lover of books and boobs, for setting that up. And also, I want to say we have a new
Ascended Snakeforce Master.
Matthew Shy. Thank you so much for signing up to the Patreon at the highest tier, the $72 a month level. Thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. New Ascended Master. See? There are Ascended Masters out there, Marty. They do exist. They are signed up to our Patreon. And you guys can email us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. And like I said, check out the website for the meetup stuff and everything else, all the podcast-related stuff. You can join the Pyramid Scheme or the Patreon if you want to support the show. Join the Facebook group. Join the Discord chat. That's also on the website. Check out the Library of the Serpent. Thanks to History Shift for making all of our YouTube videos and making the YouTube channel possible. He's put a lot of work into that, so thanks very much to him. And thanks to all you listeners out there, and to Marty. We love all you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night,
You're staring
Adamo.
at me.
Get back to work.
I'm supposed to say get back to work.
You're supposed to say whatever I don't say.
When we stop talking, it's your job to start, to finish whatever. All right, it's fine. We'll get it.
Take
these
two.
days.